Welcome to episode 2 of the Monday Morning Point Guard podcast. On today's episode, we're going to be going through the Eastern Conference and doing a little recap on what they did last year, as well as a preview of what their year will look like this year. And Clayton, would you like to kick us off with the Bucks in the Central Division?
Yep, let's start with the reigning champs. I really don't have a ton to say about their offseason because their core is pretty much the same. They're definitely looking to go back to back. I think they're a good option to go back to back this year after what we saw to Giannis in the finals. But like I said, their core is the same for the most part. I think the biggest thing with their offseason was losing PJ Tucker. I think you're going to benefit a lot by getting that pickup. He was just their gritty guy and really accepted that role. So I think losing him could hurt, but they locked up Drew Holiday for long term. And I think that's huge to have him on the team as well. We saw what he could do. Giannis, I would pick him for a third MVP this year, but I don't think the media would allow it, honestly.
I don't either.
I think he definitely could be there. He'll probably be top 5 in the candidates, but I don't think the media would allow it. They had a 54.5 projected record. I'm picking the over there. I have them as the 2 seed, and I think they'll go probably upper 50s.
Yeah, that's through DraftKings as well. It didn't look like FanDuel had theirs up yet, so I just went with what DraftKings had. Yeah, they had him at 54.5. I'm also on the over for this one. I think last year was a bit of an anomaly for them where they didn't have a super stellar record. But if you look like the years past, they've always finished near like the 60 win mark. I don't expect that to change this year. Yeah, they brought back the core. They re-signed Drew Holiday on a 4-year deal. This is the team moving forward. Just kind of they were able to get Portis back on a really affordable deal. I thought 2 years, $9 million for what he brings to the table is pretty good. They also notable, I guess, role players that they're going to get back. They didn't have DiVincenzo for the playoffs. He got hurt in the first round against Miami, so he'll be back. They also get Grayson Allen and Rodney Hood. Rodney Hood, I don't know how much he has left to give, but I still think he's a good player. So on paper, I think they've improved. I think the PJ Tucker loss, I think he hurt them more than helped them some at times in the playoffs, just with the way they used him offensively to just stand in the corner and basically do nothing. I don't know. I feel like they can get production at that spot. I think he benefits us more than he benefited them, just the way that the offense is run. I guess, as far as their title hopes, do you think I felt like last year they were really hungry. They had some playoff disappointments, obviously losing in the second round of the Heat the prior year was a big deal for them. Do you think they're going to be as hungry to repeat this year as they were to win their first last year?
I think they have to be, and they definitely will be now that they see that they can win the title. Giannis is going to be looking to come back and, prove his dominance. And if they happen to do it, we might be talking about a dynasty here. There's only so many of those players that come along, and Giannis can definitely be one of them. I have him as a 2 seed. I have him going far in the playoffs, so I would expect it. We'll see what happens when they face the Nets, probably. But
yeah, and Giannis is only in his mid-20s, so he's still got maybe not much more room to grow, but we've still got a lot of good years of him ahead of us. And as far as MVP, yeah, he should be in the front runner conversation. I just don't think the media will give him another one. Right. I think that second one of his might have been seen as a little undeserving. I don't agree, but I think that's the way they're looking at it.
The thing with Milwaukee is they're since they brought back the core, that's kind of what Golden State did during their runs, is kept that core together and just fill out the bench as you go. And I think Milwaukee's even a little deeper this year. So that's why I think they're going to be still pretty dominant.
I think they are too. And they had some injuries to deal with. And, we saw Jeff Teague play actually some minutes in the finals for them, which was a complete debacle for them. George Hill is still a good player. To replace those Jeff Teague minutes with George Hill minutes, if you have to, that's pretty good. I think Grayson Allen is actually somewhat decent, especially if
I think he's a good piece.
If you're asking him to play 10 to 15 minutes a game, I think that's a good role for him. And then, I think Giannis kind of hit the next level in the playoffs. When they started putting him at center and he kind of realized, I don't have to dominate the ball, like bring it up the court and set the table for everyone. I just need to hang around the basket, make cuts, like just dominate in the post. Like that's when they became really dangerous against Phoenix, and that's why we saw them kind of dominate the back half of that series. Yeah, I have them as the first seed. I think if you had, I think one or two is probably about as low as you could go for them. I don't see them dipping into the three like they were last year. If you're betting, I think looking at the over, I think this is a strong team to take the over on. Kind of with that though, it for just any team in general this year, we're not going to talk too much about the COVID stuff, or try to avoid it as much as possible, just because everyone's sick of hearing about it. But just keep that in mind when you're betting these. Like guys could miss a couple weeks for COVID, and so just in general, I would probably lean more towards the under on teams. But for the Bucks, I think they'll hit 55 wins, barring complete disaster.
Yeah, I think that's only on pace with 3 games better than last year, and Philly won the conference last year. I don't see him being that dominant this year, so no. I think they can definitely have three wins in their pocket.
Yeah, definitely. All right, I guess we'll move on to the Bulls here. They had a big off season. I guess kind of talk to us about that.
Yeah, they're a brand new team from what it looks like. Since the trade deadline, got Vucevic in, got rid of Markkanen, Valentine, Thad, Aminu, and then brought in Lonzo Ball, DeMar DeRozan, Alex Caruso. Notable Chaminade alum Tyler Cook also joined the team. Let's see if he gets some minutes this year. I kind of expect a lot out of LaVine this year. It's his contract year, and he, wants to make a playoff push. And they're definitely in that mode where it would probably be a disappointment if they didn't make the playoffs.
Yeah, I would say so.
The bottom half of the East this year, in terms of once you get past like the 3 and 4 seed, is so competitive. But I think they'll get in the playoffs through the play-in, or maybe just secure a spot. Lonzo, I think, is in a great position to succeed. He's got himself some shooters, kind of. I mean, LaVine was a 40% guy. I think Patrick Williams is a pretty good shooter, and Vucevic too. So I think he's really in a good spot there. They don't have a lot of defense though, so I feel like they're going to have to be, 130 point scoring team a night.
They absolutely will have to. They also don't have any size. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you caught any of their preseason games. They look pretty good, but it is preseason. But they are basically running DeRozan at the 4, which is, he's traditionally been a shooting guard. I think you're fine with him at small forward. I think it's a bit of a stretch to throw him at the power forward, especially when you have Vucevic, who actually I didn't realize how well he rebounded last year at like 12 a game. That's really good, but he's not protecting the rim. He's not blocking shots. He's not doing any of those things. It looks like they're going to use Vucevic as like a kind of a fulcrum for their offense this year. They do a lot of like handoffs and like cuts off of his high post touches, which is interesting. I think that's exciting for them. It's a completely different team. But I worry about their wing depth. I mean, Patrick Williams is still young, and then they bring in Derrick Jones Jr., who I like probably more than I should, just from his Heat days. And then, Vucevic is really the only viable option at center. You might get a couple minutes out of Tony Bradley, but like, I don't want to rely on that. I think you're a little bit higher on them than I am. I think they're going to struggle.
So I've got them as the 8 seed.
Okay.
I got them as the 8 seed, whether that means they, I was higher on them yesterday, and then I kind of rethought it and went through all the teams. I don't know if they'll be through the play-in, or, I guess they'll win their game however they get it. I don't know if they'll go in as a 10 seed, 8 seed, or what, but I think they'll secure the 8 spot. It's pretty disappointing if they miss the playoffs. I think they should definitely do it.
I think so too. I think in a traditional, like the way we've had it in the past, I think they're a top 8 seed. I think last week we kind of talked about how it'd be a disappointing season if they played in the play-in game. But when you start going through the East, it's going to be tough for them, especially like having zero defense. Like this team could easily give up 150 points in a game, like no problem, no trouble, but they're going to score a lot of points. They're set up really well to play offense. I think LaVine is going to play his ass off this year. He's in a contract year and he wants a max. I think they're kind of dragging their feet by giving him a max. He's a max player. If they don't give it to him, someone else will. And their salary cap situation is one that like they kind of don't have a choice. Like if they don't re-sign him, they're not going to be able. They don't have enough room going forward to kind of replace that production.
What do you think of Lonzo's contract? 4 years, 80 million.
I thought that was a really good deal for them. I
Yeah.
think Lonzo is super underrated. Last week when we talked about the top 50, he was probably in the 60, 65 range for me. He's because of his dad's antics, he's kind of not thought of as well as I think he should be. He plays really like elite level defense. He's a great playmaker and he's starting to hit threes. Like that's always been the big question mark with him. Now he's not going to be like a 20 a game score or 30 a game score for you, but I mean, he can get to 12 and give you probably 8 assists and really great defense. And if he's hitting 40% threes, I mean, from a starting point guard, that's really all you can ask for from a non all-star level guy.
Yeah, I think he's got 4 pretty good scoring options too in his lineup, and not a lot of pressure on him to score. He can just be the playmaker and defender that he is. I think
Yeah, he has
he'll be all right with them.
No pressure to score with this group.
Yeah,
And I think Caruso is actually like a low-key good pickup for them. I mean, 4 years, 37 million is kind of a lot for Alex Caruso, but he's good on defense. He's decent sized. I think they desperately need anybody who can play defense with this group. Yeah, I think they're going to struggle some, and I think they're going to get absolutely wiped out in the playoffs. I think they're going to,
I don't see him going far.
No, I think they might get a game off of a top seed just because they might have a big shooting night, but I think they're going to see why, you need to play defense, especially come playoff time. It's not going to matter as much in the regular season, but I think come playoff time, they're going to really feel that.
Another thing with them is they don't have a ton of reliable 3-point shooting beyond Levine, and Lonzo's getting better. Vucevic is a decent shooter too, but I don't think we've seen enough out of Pat Williams to really call him a good shooter yet. Kobe White hasn't been great, and DeRozan just doesn't shoot threes.
Williams is more DeRozan as a 3-point shooter than he is like Levine. He's got some mid-range stuff like DeRozan. We haven't really seen him stretch it out to the 3-point line quite yet. So I mean, yeah, I don't think you're in a good situation if you're relying on him as a 3-point shooter. Jones Jr. is kind of in the same boat. Like you're kind of hoping that he makes the 3 and he makes some threes, but you're not like when he shoots it, you're like, oh boy, like, is that going in? It's not an automatic thing by any stretch. I bet he's in the low 30s shooting threes. And Caruso is an okay shooter. I don't know much about Kobe White. I don't think he's known as much of a shooter either. Yeah, they're going to make their money on the fast break, like that. They're going to have to run, and that's kind of it for them. I think in the half court.
I think that's why Lonzo's a good pickup. That's why I like Lonzo, because when they're on the fast break, they have a guy who can run the entire floor, and obviously DeRozan and Levine can get down there quickly. So, and Kobe White's a fast guy too. So, how did
you feel about them letting go of Lauri Markkanen? We'll talk about his fit a little bit later on in this division.
I didn't have strong feelings about Markkanen. I like their lineup better this year than if I inserted him into their lineup. I think.
Okay.
I don't have much to say about him.
Yeah, he doesn't really fit well, and he didn't fit well while he was there, and I don't think he fits well with his new team, which we'll talk about here in a minute. I think he's a good player. I think he could be a really good player for the right team. He had the Jim Boylan situation, the previous coach of Chicago. He hated him for whatever reason and just like did not put him in. All the players hated Jim Boylan. So this is year 2 of Billy Donovan, and the way they run offense makes a lot more sense now. I don't know that Donovan is necessarily a great coach, but when Jim Boylan is your predecessor, it makes you look like a really phenomenal coach. Yeah, I don't know. Markkanen didn't fit with this team, and I don't know what team he fits with as a 7-footer who plays no defense, but he shoots threes. So I don't know. I thought it was a big loss at first, but when you look up and down their roster, I think they can afford to lose a guy like that, and especially at the price tag. You're basically replacing him with Lonzo Ball. I think most teams would take that trade.
I would agree.
All righty, we're moving on in the Central Division to the Pacers. they had a really bad year last year by their standards. I think they finished ninth in the conference. Is that right? Yeah,
Yep.
because they were the
Yeah,
first.
ninth. They just missed the play-in.
They were in the play-in. They won their first play-in game, but then they lost in their
Lost to
second.
Boston, I believe.
They lost to Washington.
Washington.
Yeah, they lost to Washington, and Washington ended up playing the Sixers in the first round. That's right. Yeah, they were the fifth seed the prior year in the bubble. And I think that's more of where they're at as a team. It's the same team from last year and the previous year. They fired Nate McMillan. They brought in this new guy, and he was just a complete jerk by all accounts. All the players hated him. All the assistant coaches hated him. Ownership hated him. Nobody liked this guy, and they basically had like a mutiny halfway through the year. And then they kept him on board through the rest of the season. Now they bring in Rick Carlisle for their coach, who's, thought of, whether that's right or wrong, thought of as one of the best coaches in the league. At the very least, he's going to have some pull with these players. If you look up and down their starting lineup, like they've got a good starting five, and they've got trades to make. I think you could deal Miles Turner and Gogi Batadze in some type of package to get something back. I think you would probably rather have Sabonis play center than power forward. But yeah, they're sitting at 42.5, so a 43 win team for the year, this upcoming year. Last year, as bad of a year as they had, they were on pace to win 39 games. I think you should consider them for the over, but I don't feel super strongly about it. I have them finishing ninth in the conference and playing in that the back half of the play-in. What are your thoughts on them?
I also have them at ninth. Most of the team is the same. I think it's just we're finally seeing the East being really competitive at the bottom of the playoff bracket.
Yeah.
So I went back and forth with Chicago and Indiana a lot with between 8 and 9. I think Chicago might just edge them out a little bit. But yeah, I'm going under 42.5. I mean, 39 wins last year. That's historically a playoff team in the East. I think the conference is better now.
Yeah.
But yeah, similar team. I think Rick Carlisle is good for them. I didn't understand why they fired Nate McMillan. I think he's a good coach, but
I didn't either.
Carlisle was definitely a good shot too.
I mean, I know they got swept in the first round by the Heat the year they fired McMillan, but they didn't have Sabonis, and they had like Oladipo, who had just come back from injury, so he wasn't himself. And it was basically like Malcolm Brogdon and that weird bubble version of TJ Warren, who was scoring like crazy, versus everybody. And Miles Turner did nothing for them. I'm not a huge Miles Turner guy. I was a lot higher on him when he was younger and kind of the only big guy. And then he just kind of never developed. And I think it's part of his growth was stunted by Sabonis kind of coming into his own, because you kind of want both of those guys to play center, but they're two of their best players, so they kind of also have to play at the same time. It's just kind of a weird fit. The notable, they bring back McConnell on 4 years, 34. I don't know how I feel about the 4 years, but like he's really good. He plays good defense. He's a good backup point guard. I think that was great that they brought him back. They get Chris Duarte at the draft. He's an older rookie, so he kind of is what he is, but what he is a 3-and-D guy. Like he's going to knock down threes. He's going to play good defense. He's going to hustle, like all the things you want for like a bench guy. They also get Torrey Craig. I don't know how much he's going to play. He played on the Suns, wasn't it? I can't remember. He was on the Bucks and the Suns last year at one point. I don't know who he
played for
finished the
Denver
year
a little
with.
bit.
Yeah,
he gets a ring regardless. That's the cool thing about that.
Yeah, so I don't know how important he'll actually be. Batadze, I think, is a good big guy, but he's just kind of in a weird space, kind of like the other two big guys on this team, where there's just not a lot of minutes as like a true center to go around on this team. So I think he's an interesting trade piece. I think somebody could get him on a deal, and I think he could be productive for someone else. They lost Aaron Holiday, which I actually think is a bigger deal. I like him as a backup point guard. I guess you have McConnell, and then they have Justin Holiday and Jeremy Lamb, who can also play some guard. Hopefully LeVert is healthy this year. Same with Brogdon. He's had some injury stuff, but you've got 2 to I would say 2.5 like potential all-star guys if you want to throw TJ Warren in that mix. And so that's a pretty good roster. Yeah. Do you have anything else to add about them?
Yeah, the roster looks good. I don't know if I would say he's a borderline all-star. I
Warren?
like Jeremy Lamb though, and definitely McConnell. Yeah. McConnell and Lamb are definitely good to have off the bench, and Goga Batadze as well. I liked Doug McDermott on their team last year. I think, stretch four is always good, but they got rid of him to San Antonio. I don't know who they got in that trade, but McDermott was supposed to be part of
I think they maybe got the Duarte pick, or they got some future pick because they gave Aaron Holiday in that huge trade. There were some crazy draft trades that were tough to keep up with like 4 and 5 teams. I think they're definitely a playoff team. I don't know where they're going to finish. I think they're a play-in team. I don't think they're going to crack the top seeds. When you start to really go down the East, it is much more competitive this year. There were very few Eastern Conference teams that just outright like sold and like are looking to rebuild. I can think of only one that intentionally did that. I think another one may have unintentionally done that, but which we'll talk about next, actually. In the Cleveland Cavaliers, oh boy, Cleveland. They're gonna. Last year, they kind of in a rebuilding stage. For whatever reason, they don't like Colin Sexton, who was 24.
I don't get it either.
He was 24 a game for him last year, and it might be good stats, bad team guy, and he's a little undersized as a shooting guard. And they have Garland, who's an undersized point guard. So I can see why they maybe don't love the fit, but they've been a little too public about it. And I don't think anybody's really biting on the Sexton thing. For whatever reason, they don't like him. They still have Kevin Love. Oddly enough, Anderson Varejao played some minutes for them last year. I could not believe that when I was looking through their transactions this offseason.
Yeah, that was a surprise to see him in the lineup.
Yeah. This is basically a team of big guys. I mean, they're having projected at 28 wins for the year. Like they're 27.5. So if you think they're going to win 28 games, good luck. They're not gonna be a nearly 30 win team. This roster is not it. They've got some guys that I like, but it just nothing fits together. So for big guys, they've got really 4 big guys who can play center, who aren't really suited for the power forward, and who want to play minutes. Like Kevin Love has been a power forward his whole career, but in today's game, he has to be center with his mobility issues. You got Lauri Markkanen, who's similar mobility issues, and you got Evan Mobley, who you just drafted, and Jared Allen. And
I like Evan Mobley.
Let's talk about
favorite player in the draft. Probably
he was mine too.
Yeah, and I see a lot of overlap with Jared Allen though, so I don't really know how it's going to fit. And like you said, Lauri Markkanen and Kevin Love overlap each other, so I don't really know what's going on there. I took the under for the record. I have them at 14th in the conference.
I also have them at 14th. There's one team who's much worse. I don't think they're intentionally tanking here. I think they're because they bring in Ricky Rubio, they sign Jared Allen, they bring in Lauri Markkanen. They're insistent that Kevin Love is an asset. They're unwilling to trade. They're thinking that they're going to get 2 first-round picks for Kevin Love. That's why he's still there, because teams have been interested in him, but everybody is like, no, we're doing you the favor by taking his horrible contract. And they're like, no, he's still an asset. He's worth 2 first-round picks. He's not. Do you think we'll see him give up in the middle of a game like last year, where he just throws the ball to the other team and walks off the court?
I don't think we'll see that again. He got a lot of fire for that. His contract is a mess. It's only deal with that, but I don't know why another team want it though.
It's only 2 more years. It's at this point, it's only 2 more years. It feels like he's been under this contract for 10 seasons, but it feels
like an eternity.
He's got 2 more years left on it. So I guess if you were really desperate for a big guy, like you could swing it that way. Yeah. I hear they're interested in Simmons, which is another disastrous fit alongside like Evan Mobley, who might be able to shoot at one point, but that's not really like a strong suit of his game. There is some redundancy with him and Jared Allen. Jared Allen, who they signed for 5 years, 100 million. That's a pretty steep price tag for a center. I like Jared
Yeah,
Allen.
they paid a lot for him.
I like Jared Allen, and I think they signed that extension before they knew they were getting Mobley. I actually don't mind the fit alongside Mobley from a developmental stage. Everything I've heard about Mobley and seen, it looks like he has the potential to be like an elite defender, like one of those guys who can guard 1 through 5, but I don't think he's there yet. So if you let him play alongside Allen, he doesn't get his confidence beaten up by getting scored on every night and picked on. And you can kind of protect his ego a little bit until, once that Allen contract is up, he'll be ready to be like the man. And then you could trade Allen and on the last year, 1 year 20. I think it was split evenly, that Allen contract. So
Okay.
1 year 20 is like a pretty easy contract to trade. I think the only issue with this team, aside from the logjam at big guy, they don't have any wing players. They don't have any wing guys who I'm like super excited about. Okoro is like pretty good. I think he's okay, but I think he's 6'5". So like he's probably would rather play shooting guard. And then you've got Osman, who's like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what they're doing here. What is the plan here? What is their plan as a team?
I really don't know. Their bench is not giving them anything really when your next options are, Denzel Valentine, Kyle Guy, and Chetty Osman. But
they do have Ricky Rubio.
They're really weak outside of their. Yeah, I like Ricky Rubio. I think he's a pretty solid backup point guard.
I hate that he's there. I love Rubio. I think he's awesome as like a backup point guard. I think he's like an excellent backup point guard, and I hate that he's just going to be wasted in Cleveland here because what's the weird thing is they traded Taurean Prince, who they could really use on this team, to get Ricky Rubio to get like another point guard. It's just like all they have are point guards and centers on this team. So I don't know how they're going to be playing. Like, I don't know what the game plan would be. Like, if I was JB Bickerstaff, their coach, and I walk in after the offseason and looking around my roster, I have no idea what to do with this group.
Yeah, it's a weird way to build them with Sexton and Garland in the same backcourt. I don't know if that's going to work. I don't know why they're so publicly against having Sexton in their lineup, like you said. I think he's great, but I think he'd fit well on any other team for the most part.
Yeah, and I don't know either. I think they would like to trade Sexton and Love to get Ben Simmons, but again, kind of going back to what would be the plan then? Then you've got Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, and Ben Simmons. Like that doesn't fit together in my head.
Yeah, he would definitely be in the 4 spot too if they were to get Simmons, and I don't see those 3 players really working out together.
I think they're hoping
Markkanen coming off the bench too.
I think they're hoping Allen turns into like somewhat of a shooter, which he has shown some mid-range stuff, but like I'm not confident enough that that's going to work out to rely on that. Yeah, I don't know what the plan is. They're going to have a tough time if they want to trade Allen within the next couple of years. I think they're going to have a tough time getting anyone to commit to a center for that long. Centers in the NBA are kind of like running backs in the NFL. I kind of mentioned that last week. Like you can get good value for a starting center or a backup center. You can find guys who are pretty cheap who can do similar things to somebody you're playing. You can find a similar guy for $5 million a year than what they just gave for Jared Allen. He might be a little bit worse, but not enough to make up for that difference in pay. But it is important to have a center. They're your safety valve for your guards in terms of like you can just dump it down to them on lobs, on screen and rolls. Like it's important to have one. They just have 4 that are all kind of ill-suited together, and who are gonna all want to play big minutes. Yeah, I think this team is in the running for probably worst team in the league. I think there's a worse team in this conference, but I don't know that there's a worse team on the west side of things.
I think we probably agree on the worst team in the conference.
Yeah,
the West, I don't think there's any worse teams than those 2.
No, and
maybe
and
one, but
and that's what's exciting about the East this year is like outside of Cleveland and a team we'll get to in the next division, everybody else is competing for that for a play-in spot. I would say they're at least in the mix. There's a case for them. Whether they'll get it or not, obviously, is a different story. But they're at least in the running. Like these Cleveland and I guess we could spoil it. Orlando are just terrible. Like they're just going to be bad this year. Cleveland actually kind of offends me with like what they did, what the way they spent their money. They also traded Nance in the offseason, which I don't think was a great move. Yeah, he's a good player, but I guess looking at their roster, they really don't have a place for him. Yeah, and honestly, how will they ever recover from losing Matthew Dellavedova and Anderson Varejao?
yeah, those are some cornerstone pieces right there.
Yeah, I could not believe either of those two were still in the league. They actually played for him last year too. All right, last team in the Central Division, the Detroit Pistons. They were the Cleveland for last year, I would say. This year, I feel a little bit better about them. I actually think they've got a decent shot at a play-in berth. They end up winning the draft lottery and drafting Cade Cunningham, who is going to be a godsend for this roster. They've got some good young players. Dwayne Casey, who I really like as a coach, he was the year the Raptors fired him, he was coach of the year. He immediately signs on with Detroit, and I think he's going to be a good coach for them. Yeah, they're projected at 25.5 wins. They were on pace for 23 last year. I think this is an easy over. What do you think?
Yeah, I took the over as well. Cade Cunningham is going to be fantastic for them, and I think their lineup is, much better than last year. I think if they had a most improved team award, we would give it to them after this year.
Yeah.
I have them at 13, the 13 seed, but I think that's just because of how competitive the East is now. I don't have them getting that close to the play-in, but they're definitely a lot better than they were last year. Kelly Olynyk, interested to see how he's going to do there. We saw 20 points out of him last year in Houston, which isn't saying much considering who they had.
No. Did you see some of the guys who were scoring points for them? Like they had one guy 5 years in China, his first game in the NBA, he takes 20 shots and scores like 26 points. I don't even remember his name. Yeah, Houston was a complete debacle. I had him I had him finishing 12th, so just one spot higher. I think they're competing for a play-in. When you look at the teams, we'll kind of recap the teams we have in what order. I think when you look at the teams we have over them, I think they're certainly better. It's a good roster. It's well put together. I'm a lot more bearish on Kelly Olynyk after watching him for God knows how many years in Miami. I think he's fine as a backup center for this team. But yeah, he's not as good as his numbers say. He's a disaster on defense, like an outright disaster. Sometimes he just zones out and he just forgets he's on a basketball court and his man has, cut for a wide open layup, or he's late on a rotation. Like he's just a split second late on any decision he makes, and it will drive you nuts. But he can shoot. He can handle, he can do some other stuff. He's not going to rebound as a big guy. That's kind of a bummer. But yeah, I think Killian Hayes, it looks like they're going to run Hayes and Cunningham as the backcourt. I like Killian Hayes. I know he had kind of a bad year.
I'm a fan.
I know he had kind of a bad year last year, but he was hurt for most of it, and he just kind of never got his footing. I think he could be good for them. And I think Sadiq Bey, it's all the makings of a good 3-and-D guy. Jeremy Grant surprised me. When they gave him that contract, I was like, oh boy, like how is that going to look? He's actually a decent scoring option. And Isaiah Stewart.
Yeah, I like Jeremy Grant.
Yeah, Isaiah Stewart for their like just hustle rebounding guy. He's probably going to start at center for them, I have to imagine. It's a good starting lineup. Their bench leaves a little bit to be desired, but I mean, I could see them sneaking into like a late, play-in spot if things break right for them. I think, they're projected to win 26. I think they're closer to 30 than they are to 24.
Yeah, I'd put them around 30. And their core is young, which is really good for them. that leaves them cap space. So who knows if they end up, proving to be a not terrible team. I know Detroit's not a big free agent destination, but they have the space to work with it. So
Yeah, they do. They will
they
have
can
some
turn it
cap.
around.
They will have some cap space for next season, so they could bring in a veteran or a couple of veterans if this ends up being a decent roster. Then I think we're definitely talking about them in the playoffs for next year. If they can shore up this bench. I mean, the bench pieces I like for them. I like Corey Joseph, Diallo, and that's about it. It's about the only two that I feel like pretty strongly about. Trey Lyles is okay, and Olynyk is okay. So that's where their weakness is. Starting five wise, I think they're fine there for this season.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to go from
they're
first,
definitely not the worst team in the league.
no, it's like actually a decent roster. When I was looking at them last year, it was like the team of centers, and that's like all they had on the team when they started the year. And they've really turned it around in 1 year. That's not something we usually say about Detroit. We're not usually like kind of excited to see Detroit play.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's definitely a surprise.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's pretty much. They were actually a decent defensive team last year. It looks like it. I mean, they finished 10th in the league in points allowed per game. So if they can continue that, I think they'll get some more offense. Just having Cade Cunningham out there could be an okay team. All right, now we're going to move on to the Southeast Division, and we're going to start with my Miami Heat. After our finals run, kind of a big disappointment last year. We got out to a slow start. We had so many injuries and so many COVID things. There was a game we played the Nets. We actually nearly beat them where we had 7 active guys, and 2 of them were two-way guys. Like we were playing like our G League guys and bam, and that was about it. So it was just the year from hell for us. Tyler Hero was one that really struggled last year after his kind of coming out party in the bubble where he just dominated. I think some of that's overstated. People are saying like he's not as good as he was in the bubble or he'll never get to that level again. I don't agree. They started him at point guard to start last year just out of necessity. And I think he's kind of just not well suited to play point guard. He's a good ball handler and a good passer, but not as the lead guy. And so I think that shook his confidence. He was also in every trade rumor because we were rumored to be trading for every player in the league last season. And yeah, he struggled. We also got Oladipo for basically nothing from Houston. We traded Olynyk, and Olynyk's expiring, Avery Bradley's expiring contract, and 2 pick swaps to Houston, who is going to be probably one of the worst teams in the league. So we're not even going to end up swapping picks. So we basically got him for nothing. The only problem is he gave us nothing. He was 4 games and then he was hurt for the year. So we basically gave away 2 rotation pieces and we didn't get anything for it. We were on pace to finish, even with all that said, we were on pace to finish 46 and 36. This year we're projected 49 and 33. I have us finishing 4th this year. I would actually take the under on this team. I don't think they're going to hit 50 wins.
I have them 48 and a half is a tough number. I have them at 4th as well. Yeah, I went under. I think bringing Lowry in addresses a lot of the issues they dealt with last year in terms of who's going to be their main point guard. He brings a lot of leadership, certainly. And I think that takes a lot of pressure off Jimmy Butler and kind of defines Tyler's role a little bit better. It really is, what are you going to get out of Oladipo? I mean, he's never really recovered since 2018, which is unfortunate because he was definitely a spark.
I think it will be okay. I think he'll be a nice bonus. The reason I have this team as an under is we're very old. We're a very old team. Kyle Lowry is old. Oladipo is old, more so because of injuries. PJ Tucker, we brought in, is super old. Morris is old. Dwayne Dedmon is old. Jimmy is getting up there. Like, of the young guys, Duncan Robinson isn't even that young. I mean, he's in his late 20s. The Hero is the
I can't believe you didn't even mention Udonis Haslem as the old guy.
Udonis Haslem, well, if he was going to play at all. I mean, he'll play one game like he did last year, get tossed in the first 2 minutes for.
Yeah, when they play Dwight Howard, they'll put him in the game.
Yeah, just to pick a fight with him again. Yeah, yeah. Obviously, Udonis Haslam is very old. We do have some, I think Duncan Robinson, I didn't really, some people thought we overpaid him. I think it was fine. I think for what I mean, he is probably, you know, definitely in the top five for best shooter. I think probably in the top three for as far as shooting in the league. Like if you give him any space at all, that could be running off of screens, dribble handoffs, whatever. Like if he has any room at all, he's basically knocking it down. And like his 3-point
Yeah, I don't.
percentage could be a lot better if he was more choosy about some of his shots, but we don't want him to be. We want him to take those ridiculous 40 footers with two guys draped on him. Like we don't care. And so his shooting percentage might be a little bit lower than what it could actually be.
I don't think they're going to worry about overpaying him. A shooter like that, I think you got to take him. I don't think you're going to worry about overpaying because it's definitely going to help your team,
I think,
especially with Lowry on the ball now.
I think we did address the two weaknesses. So last year, watching this team, there were two things that really stood out to me. When we played the Bucks and we lost to them, Drew Holiday basically made it so we couldn't get the ball across half court. And then what they were doing on the other end, the Bucks, they were pulling Bam out onto one of the guards and just like, even though they probably weren't going to make the shot because he's so good on defense, they knew that Ariza and like Jimmy Butler weren't going to be enough to keep Brook Lopez off the boards. We really missed Crowder last year as like a secondary rebounder, a guy who can physically kind of keep an opposing center from getting to the glass. PJ Tucker is that guy, and even Morris to some extent could be that guy. So we've addressed the secondary rebounding. I mean, we were 29th in the league in rebounding last year and 23rd in pace, which for a team with a super athletic center and a small lineup, you would have not expected us to be near the bottom half of the league in pace. I caught a little bit of the preseason games. Kyle Lowry looks like he really understands like how to run a team. And I'm not surprised by that. I felt that way in Toronto. It seems like he has a good read on the pulse of this team and he knows when to push it. We're running a lot more fast break stuff. I know it's just preseason, but it's good to see because we would just walk the ball up half court last year. And that'll help get Bam some easy buckets. Jimmy, those two are two of the best players we have in the league at attacking the basket. And Tyler Hero, he's been balling out in preseason. He looks really good.
Oh, yeah.
And then low key, a guy to look out for, Max Strus. He is very good. He is a very good shooter, not to the level of Duncan Robinson, but like catch and shoot wise, he is elite. He is going to be, catch and shoot, open looks. He's knocking those down. And he can knock down some contested stuff too. The only thing I like about him over Duncan Robinson is he's built a little bit stockier. He's slower laterally, but he doesn't get pushed around like Duncan Robinson does. That's my concern with Duncan Robinson. He just gets pushed under the basket. And that's kind of, all he could do. He tries on defense, but he's just too scrawny. The teams will just pick on him. I think 49 is going to be tough to get to. Especially, this is not a regular season team. This team is built for the playoffs. This is not somebody you want to see in the playoffs. It's just tough, gritty players up and down the lineup, and they're going to be a tough out for anyone.
Yeah, the reason I had him at 4 is because I think last year they were one of those teams that was dealing with, being in the bubble for so long and then only having a month and a half to prepare for the next season. And that's why they're so injury plagued. And this year they had a lot more time to recover and their lineup looks better. I think they did address their issues. It'll be hard to be a 50-win team, but they'll definitely be top 4.
Yeah. They also have a center out of Georgetown, Omer Yurtseven. I think he's going to be pretty good. He's going to be another Kendrick Nunn, diamond in the rough guy. He shoots a little bit. He plays good defense. He's kind of like a poor man's Brook Lopez, I would say. But we'll see if he actually gets any minutes. My only concern about this team is, given that we're so old, how big is the window to win a title for this group? I think it's really this year and that's it. Because I don't know how many.
Yeah, it's not too big.
I don't know how. I think we got maybe 1-2 years left with Kyle Lowry at the level that he's out at. Maybe just 1. I would lean more to 1 than 2, and probably 2 to 3 of Jimmy Butler at a really elite level. He's getting up there in years, and the window is just not very big for this group. But I trusted Pat Riley. He's a wizard. He pulls some trades just out of left field that I have no idea how he got the other team to agree to. So we always have that in our back pocket. We're always in the mix for upgrades. But yeah, that's about all I got to say about the Heat. I think they're definitely in the title contention group, even as just a 4 seed. I don't think we would be super surprised at the end of the year if they're in the finals again.
Yeah, like you said, they're built for that kind of playoff run, especially with their experience. I don't know how it's going to work in the regular season with them in terms of minutes, because I feel like they would want to be, saving the older guys a little bit.
Yeah.
Kyle Lowry, for someone who's 36, is still very good, though. Yeah, I don't know how much longer we have out of him.
I think they're going to
I don't know if I'd
struggle.
put him.
I think they're going to struggle in the regular season a little bit. Like where they butter their bread is in the playoffs, and that's where Jimmy Butler is at his best. That's where I would say now at this point in his career, Kyle Lowry is at his best. A lot of the PJ Tucker is not really a regular season player. He's going to start at power forward for us. I mean, you've got a lot of guys who are just kind of playoff dudes. Even Dwayne Dedmon, who we got off the scrap heap last year, kind of like I mentioned with the depth at center, he's really good as a backup center. Like he shoots a tiny bit. He really doesn't shoot a lot, but when he does, he typically makes them. Finishes around the basket, plays excellent defense and rebounds. And granted, he can only give you, 5 minutes at a time of that just because he's, not in good enough shape to play at the frenetic pace that he does. But like as a backup center to come in for Bam, we've not had anybody to do that. I mean, we had Myers Leonard and Kelly Olynyk, and there was a real problem defensively when Bam wasn't on the floor for our finals team and years past. Yeah, that's really all I got to say about the Heat. I think they're definitely in the final contention group, even though they're just a 4th seed in the East. I think their regular season performance is not going to be indicative of what they're able to do in the playoffs. This is a team that nobody's going to want to play in the playoffs.
Yeah, I see them as anywhere 3 to 5 seed, and they can definitely compete.
Yeah. All right. You want to talk about the surprise of last year's playoffs, the Atlanta Hawks?
Yeah, not much has changed with Atlanta. They were definitely a surprise success story. Similar to the Knicks, where we're kind of just waiting to see what happens. Are they going to, stay at the same level, or are they just going to flop out? I think that the Hawks have a better chance of staying at this level that they were at last year. They're going to get DeAndre Hunter back, which I think is pretty good for them because they'll have a reliable defender now. And I like their lineup a lot. I still see him in the top. I think I have him at 6 this year.
Wow. I'm a lot higher on them than you are. I had them at 3.
Okay, yeah. I mean, they're also a team I could see jump into the 3rd spot. It was Miami, Boston, and Atlanta. I saw kind of competing for 3,
Right.
but I think it'll play out. They'll be kind of middle of the pack again, but definitely still a competitive team. Nate McMillan did wonders for them once they got rid of Lloyd Pierce. So I think, once we get a full season of him, we're really going to see some improvement.
Yeah, they were
Capella kind of proved to be a good guy.
They were a disaster under Lloyd Pierce, but they finished the season 27-11 under Nate McMillan. I've been very critical of Trae Young throughout his career. At first, I thought he was just classic good stats, bad team guy. Didn't really think he was a winning basketball player, but once Nate McMillan took over, I think he really worked with him a lot on what it means to be the point guard of a team and how to get his teammates kind of going and not worry about his numbers as much. He was kind of waiting to the last bit of the shot clock and like throwing a pass just so he could get his assist numbers previously. Now he's not doing that. He doesn't seem to be as concerned with the numbers. He's going to get his. He's that good. Yeah, I have them finishing as the 3rd seed. I was really impressed with what they did in the playoffs. They've got a good starting lineup. Like you said, they get Hunter back, who's like a reliable defender, which is sorely needed on this team. Any team with Trae Young is going to probably struggle defensively. They're one of the best rebounding teams in the league with Collins and Capella. They bring in Gorgie Dang, who's kind of rotted away his entire career on bad teams, but he's a pretty decent center option for you. They have Gallinari also. They'll get a Kongwu back at some point in the season, and he looked pretty good for a young guy for them last year. They've got good wing players in Bogdanovich, Hunter, and Herter. And Trae Young, DeLon Wright, and Lou Williams is a pretty good point guard rotation. there's not a lot of weaknesses on this team that I can see, and that's why I have them as the 7th seed. They're projected at 46.5 wins from DraftKings. I don't feel strongly about it. I guess I would say over. I think they're probably a 50-win team, but I would not bet the house payment or the rent payment on that.
Yeah, I'm going under since I have them towards the middle of the playoff bracket. But
yeah. So who do you have
now
ahead
that
of?
they've had a
Who do you have ahead of them?
well that
Miami,
I have
Brooklyn,
Miami, Boston, and
Boston.
Brooklyn. Yeah, and
Okay.
Philly. And Philly, I didn't know if I wanted to put above Atlanta, but
I did not.
it's so much uncertainty with I don't know what to say about Philly with what's going on with them and who they're going to have this year. So
I think that Atlanta is just a better team. I'm not basing that off of necessarily the playoff disaster Philly had last season against Atlanta. I just think if you look up and down the roster, it's just this is now that having seen them play, now I can say like, oh, this is actually a pretty confidently put together roster. Didn't expect John Collins to be the shooter that he's become, but he's like a decent floor spacer. And I don't know if you saw the dunk he had the other night over Jared Allen.
that was insane.
That was ridiculous. Yeah, Herder is a good 3-and-D guy, and he comes off the bench for them. If they can get anything from Cam Reddish, great, but they don't really have to. I think you could maybe package Reddish and Gallinari and maybe some picks because I think they have still most of their picks, if I'm not mistaken. I think you could make a trade at the deadline for a disgruntled like Harrison Barnes or something, and then that would really that's the only thing I can see kind of being the Achilles heel of this team is their wing situation. I like Bogdanovich, I like Hunter, I like Herder, but like I don't love them as like, a core. It's probably the most important position in today's league is your wing guys, and that's their weakest spot. It's not a super huge weakness for them, but it is their weakest point.
Yeah, and they're all relatively pretty young too, which is why I think it was such a surprise.
Yeah.
But yeah, Okongwu coming back, I like him a lot. I think he's going to add a lot to their bench. I see them being pretty good. I could see them competing in the playoffs. Definitely at the top of the route.
I could see them competing for the Eastern Conference title. I don't think they'll get it, but I wouldn't be completely shocked if they ended up being our Eastern Conference representative in the finals. It would be kind of a long shot for them. They're more of a dark horse, but I wouldn't be just completely shocked. They're kind of in a similar situation like to the Heat. I think it would be more surprised to see Atlanta than Miami, but not by much.
Yeah.
Obviously, we expect to see either Brooklyn or Milwaukee, but I think the Heat and the Hawks are probably the next two teams you would likely see. All right, moving on to we're getting kind of towards the back half of the Southeast Division, which is we're getting into some questionable teams here. We're going to start here with the Hornets on the potential playoff teams, but definitely not locks.
Yeah, they're a team that I have that's hovering around the play-in. I think LaMelo Ball could be considered for most improved this year. I think he's incredible, and Bouknight, I think, is really good in the preseason. I think they had a great draft night getting him and Kai Jones. They'll probably miss Devontae Graham and Malik Monk. I don't know if Oubre is a guy that can replace that type of production for him. But again, I have him at 10 for this year, and I think that's pretty fair. The DraftKings has him at 38.5 wins. I'm probably going under by a little bit just because
I'm going
the East
under.
is competitive.
I'm going under as well. I think they overperformed last year. I guess the case for them this year is they were doing really well until they got hit with the Gordon Hayward injury and LaMelo Ball missed some time, and then it kind of completely fell apart. They bring in James Bouknight as well, who I like. I think he's definitely going to be a nice piece for them. I don't know how you feel about him. Is just a guy who could come in and score for them. He's going to replace some of the Monk production. Oubre is a good wing, and I kind of like the Gordon Hayward, PJ Washington, Oubre, and Miles Bridges for like your 3 and 4 positions. Yeah, they've got a solid.
Hayward turned out to be good for them.
They've got a solid roster, and LaMelo Ball, I guess, would be considered to be a candidate for most improved player. I was looking at the odds for that this morning. I guess I just don't understand that award because Zion was near the top of the most improved list. I'm like, he was an all-star last season. Like, how would
Yeah,
I guess that makes sense. Yeah, LaMelo was the rookie of the year. How do you feel about the 4 years, 97 million for Scary Terry?
I think that's the scariest part of Scary Terry is what they're paying him. I think they'll like having him. I don't think I'd pay him that much. He's definitely a good scoring option for them. And
The
when
only
you split
reason
him up with Devontae Graham, I don't know if they can really produce that well, but I guess we'll see.
I don't like Devontae Graham. I think that was addition by subtraction for them, especially when they bring in Book Knight and I guess Oubre can kind of play some guard stuff if you really need him to. I think Book Knight will be better for that role. Devontae Graham, and we'll talk about it more in the Pelicans preview. He's really a guy who just shoots 3-pointers, and that is it. And he doesn't even really hit them at high enough of a clip for that to be the only thing that he's able to do. He plays no defense, doesn't really play make like you would like for a guy his size to. It's like his 3-point percentage is his field goal percentage, and like that's not necessarily a good thing. Yeah, with LaMelo, this will be an interesting team. I like Kai Jones as well, a dude they drafted, but I have a soft spot for like ultra athletic, kind of raw centers who don't really know what they're doing on a basketball court. But man, if anyone taught them, like they'd be phenomenal. So he kind of fits that mold. JT Thor is another guy who I really like. I think he was at Auburn last year. He looks like he could shoot the ball a little bit, but like defensively, he could be really special for a team. Like he's a long, lanky athlete, and it looks like he understands what he's doing already on defense, which is huge. A lot of the young guys just don't right away understand how to play defense. It seems like he knows what to do. I have them at 11th, and I know they were in the play-in last year, so you would expect them to kind of take a step up as LaMelo Ball takes a step up. But when you look up and down the roster, it's not as strong as the rosters that are above them. I think.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think they're just going to miss the play-in. Also, if Gordon Hayward, since he was, born under an unlucky star or something, we're kind of always prepared for disaster with him. Even though I still don't think he's injury prone, but it's not like nagging issues. He always just has some freak accident. I'm not as concerned about the Scary Terry number. It's a lot of money for what you get from him, but as a smaller market team, they're never going to be a free agent draw. So you've got to kind of overpay for these guys and to keep these guys. It's more important to keep like the salary spot than the cap room for them, because they could always trade Rozier and picks for something to upgrade if they really wanted to towards the end of that. It's an okay team. I think they're in the mix for the play-in game, but I don't think they're going to make any noise in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think if you take LaMelo out, they're not looking too great, but he's definitely a difference maker. And they're just one of those teams that you have, they could be in the play-in, they could be maybe a 9 seed, but they could also be 12, depending on how the season goes.
They were in the mix for home court in the first round last year before the injuries hit. Now, last year, I don't think the East was very competitive. I think most of the teams this offseason have improved. And I think if we had not seen them in a play-in game last year, if they had finished like 12th, I don't think we would think of them as highly this year. Like I was like, man, I would like to have them higher than 11th, but just because we've seen them, kind of in the playoffs. But if they didn't make it last year, I don't know that we would be looking at this roster and being like, yeah, this is a lock for a play-in game or a lock for the playoff berth. I don't think they are. I think they're just as likely to have a real step back year as they are to make the play-in game.
Yeah, then it's all their core is pretty young for the most part. I mean, Hayward's not young, but maybe not this year, but maybe in a few years they could be good depending on how Book Knight and Kai Jones develop. If they can keep Miles Bridges on the team, I think he's big for them. And definitely LaMelo Ball, if he stays healthy, they'll be decent in the future. But
I think they did
making a lot of noise.
I think they did upgrade center with Mason Plumlee over like Cody Zeller. I think Plumlee's like a little bit of an upgrade, and they didn't really give up a lot to get him from Detroit. So I I don't know. I mean, that's not gonna move the needle, but they did improve, I guess.
Yeah.
All righty, and here is the Orlando Magic. Oh boy. So last year they finally hit the reset button on this whole thing. They on the Vucevic, Evan Fournier, Aaron Gordon group. They had kind of been trying to compete for playoff spots with them, and to some success, they had hit a couple of playoffs. But last year at the deadline, they just had a fire sale. They traded Gordon, they traded Fournier, they traded Vucevic. And they got some picks back. I actually like what they did in the offseason and kind of with the trade deadline. I have them finishing 15th, so last in the conference. But I think it was time to hit the reset button and time to kind of move on. They draft Jalen Suggs falls to them. Orlando kind of has a history of like being just out of like whenever the lottery goes, they're just out of like picking for the top guys. Like if there's 3 really good players, they pick 4. If there's 5 really good players, they pick 6. They're always in that next tier. And so it looked like that was going to be the case again this year, but then Toronto takes Scotty Barnes. And so Jalen Suggs ends up falling to them. Also, I like Franz Wagner, who they got with the Chicago pick that they took from the Vucevic trade. I like him too. I like the young guys that they have. It's a terrible team. They're projected at 22.5 wins, so 23 wins for the season. That's on pace for 1 win less from last year, where they had half the year with like their good core. This is an easy under for me. I don't know that this team hits 20 wins. It's gonna be tough to watch. There is not a lot of talent here, not a lot of proven talent on the roster, but I like the young guys.
Yeah, I think they got a steal with Suggs at 5. And I'm a big fan of Franz Wagner as well. They're also getting Jonathan Isaac back this year, who can definitely be an elite defender for them if he stays healthy. I don't know if the injury will keep him as laterally explosive, but
yeah, he's had, unlike Gordon Hayward, like his injuries are a lot more concerning. They're not freak accidents. They're like ACLs. Like, did he have an Achilles too? I don't know. He's missed a lot.
I know it was the ACL, but I don't know.
A lot of knee stuff. Yeah, frightening.
It's hard to call an NBA team under 20 wins because you'd think that a group of professional basketball players could figure out how to win at least a quarter of their games. I don't know if they can do it either.
But how many of these guys are professional basketball players? Like actually like belong on an NBA roster? Like Michael Carter Williams is on this team, which is unbelievable to me. He actually played like quite a bit, it looked like, last year for them. I have to be completely honest, didn't watch a ton of Orlando Magic basketball last year, especially post the trade. I don't know. They have Isaac, who I like if he could ever be healthy. Like he is defensive player of the year candidate written all over him if he can stay healthy. I'm not as high on Cole Anthony. I don't know. I just don't see it with him. Markelle Fultz is also here, which, you know, if he can stay healthy, great. It looked like he started to kind of turn it around a little bit. But other than that, do you feel strongly about Mo Bamba or Wendell Carter, like in any way?
I think it's interesting to see how they're going to work together. Mo Bamba was a guy who I thought would make a huge impact for Orlando when he got drafted and just never did. I think Wendell Carter, I expected him to be a little bit better than he is too. I don't feel super strongly about either of them. No surprise. I have them at, 15th in the conference too. It's going to be a tough team to watch this year. I don't know if I'll catch many games.
We've agreed on a lot of the conference placing so far, or at least it's been in the area. There aren't really too many surprises. Yeah. But yeah, like you said, the play into about like, I don't know, the 7th seed is all very competitive. And then really 5 through 3, I think, is going to be pretty competitive. And then you've got the 2 at the top, Brooklyn and Milwaukee, who are both going to be very good. But yeah, I obviously like Mo Bamba. I still believe in him. I think it's more of just my thing where I just love the super athletic centers. Like he's a freak of nature. He should be awesome at basketball, but he's not for whatever reason. Like if I told you could have a center who's got a nearly 8-foot wingspan, ran the lane agility drill at the combine faster than Russell Westbrook, and can shoot threes a little bit, like you'd be like, oh, well, that guy's like an MVP candidate. Like,
Yeah.
but it's just not
And
the
that's why I
case with
liked him a lot coming out of
Yeah.
college.
I think it's probably more likely to not happen at this point for him than it will be to like happen. I
Right.
think he's probably on his way kind of out of the league at this point. I still like Wendell Carter. I didn't really like him coming out of college, but he was alongside Bagley, I think. So that might have been why. I think he could be a starting center. They've got some pieces to build on here, and they still have Terrence Ross, who's got like a very tradable contract. I think this season we'll probably see him chipped off for something. I don't know. They also have Gary Harris, like, expiring contract. That's about all he is for them at this point, I would say.
Yeah.
And I think this might be, he might have one or two more stops in the league, but I think that might be about it for Gary Harris. He's had some injuries and it just kind of never really happened for him. Do you like RJ Hampton at all?
Not enough to say he's gonna do much to turn the team around. I think he definitely has a good opportunity to make an impact on this roster, better than he did in Denver. So, if he gets the time, I think he could do something with it. I'm not a huge Cole Anthony fan either. I think Suggs is really going to prove to be the better point guard of the two. Yeah, I think overall Orlando is pretty shoe-in for worst team in the league this year.
Yeah, I'm not as high on Suggs, I don't think, as you are.
I think he's a steal at 5.
Watching him in the tournament, I think watching him against Baylor in particular, which had like NBA guys kind of up and down that roster, he kind of struggled to get around people like on drives, on those like actually like elite athletes. So if he has trouble getting around people at the NBA level for like drives to the basket, I think it could be tough. But I agree, getting him at 5 was just like, is like a breath of fresh air for Orlando. Cause I was just like, oh, Kuminga is just going to fall right to Orlando. And it's going to be another raw wing who doesn't know how to play basketball. It seems like that's all they know how to draft. No, I thought they had a good draft. I thought, given the fact that they were hitting the reset button, I think they did a fine job. Yeah, not a lot to say. They're going to probably finish last in the league. I don't actually think they'll win the number 1 pick, but that's just an Orlando
that would
thing.
Yeah, they're definitely going to be 1 and then not get the 1 pick. I could definitely see that happening.
They're competing for the number 1 pick this year. We'll just say that about them. All right, Washington. I think this might be a team that we have some disagreement on. Washington last year, they traded John Wall for Russell Westbrook with a first rounder. I guess it worked out. I don't really know. I think in hindsight now, I actually like the package they got back for Westbrook, but it wasn't the needle mover that they were kind of hoping it would be. I never thought it was going to be. It was just a worse version of Westbrook and Harden on a worse team. But yeah, they struggled to start the year and they really kind of just never got it going. And then at the very end of the year, Russell Westbrook just went nuts and just carried them to that 8th spot, I think. Yeah, they played Boston in the first playing game.
Yep.
And they ended up as the 8th seed. They lost to Boston, ended up playing Philly in the first round, and were actually somewhat competitive. Like, they hung around in games, and I think they stole one. And they were pretty good. This offseason, they trade Russell Westbrook for like the poo-poo platter from the Lakers bench, basically. And I actually think it was a decent trade. They bring in Spencer Dinwiddie. I have them finishing 10th in the conference. They're projected to win 33 games, so 33 and a half, so 34 games. Last year, they went 39 and 43. I think this isn't over. I think they're a better team this year than they were last year. And to be on pace to win 39 games last year, I think they can at least hit 39 this year.
Yeah, so I have them at 11. So we flipped Charlotte and Washington with each other. The Westbrook trade, I think, is good, at least for the players. I don't know how it'll turn out for Washington. I think Harrell just didn't have a great opportunity in the Lakers organization. I think this team, he definitely has at least a better opportunity to do something good. I'm not super high on Kuzma. I think adding Dinwiddie was good. I don't know if he can really replace that push that Westbrook gave them. I think if they want to really be pushing for the play-in game, they need to have a big season out of Rui and Gafford, which, I think they're both great players.
I think Gafford is good. Yeah. And Rui showed in the Olympics he might actually be pretty good too. I'm higher on Kyle Kuzma. I think a lot of people were kind of down on Brandon Ingram before he got to New Orleans. It's just tough to be a small forward and play alongside LeBron. I actually have him I think he's a decent bet for most improved player if you want to bet on that. I think he could have a big year for them. He's going to get the opportunities. They've really not got a ton of wing depth. The only thing, the big reason why I think they're better this year, if you watch, I don't know how much you watch them play. If you didn't watch them play, be sure to watch a Wizards home game just so you could get Drew Gooden as a color commentator. He's hilarious. But no, they didn't have like a full roster of guys who belong in the NBA. Like when they went to the bench, they're going like Jordan McRae, like Garrison Matthews, and it's just like as soon as the bench comes in, it's just a complete disaster. Now they have I think a pretty full team of NBA players. I like Aaron Holiday as a backup point guard. Contavious Caldwell Pope for 15, 20 minutes. I think that's all they'll need out of him. I think that's fine. Raul Neto, they re-sign him. I like him. They draft Corey Kispert. I don't know that he's going to be very good, but I don't know. Some people think he is. Then, you have Kuzma and Avdia. Maybe Avdia gives you something. Rui and Bertans. Bertans was good at one point. As a center rotation, I think you can do worse than Daniel Gadford and Montrezl Harrell, especially with Montrezl as the backup. He didn't give the Lakers much, but he'll have to give them something, and he'll get the opportunities to play for this Washington team. I think I would be shocked if they weren't a play-in team.
Yeah, I think that was Harrell's biggest thing is opportunity, and I'm a big fan of Gafford, and Davis Bertans I think is great off the bench. I'm not giving up on Denny Avdia just yet. He had a pretty rough rookie season, but
I think some of that was
he'll be pretty good
Westbrook.
off the bench for them.
Westbrook historically has young guys have struggled to play alongside him, so it could be that. I don't know. I didn't see much with him. Much to get excited about. I wouldn't bet on him doing a lot, but I don't know. Maybe it's too early to give up on him. We'll see. But yeah, I think this is a play. I think Spencer Dinwiddie is pretty good too. And imagine that Brooklyn team last year with Dinwiddie on the team. Like even in the playoffs without Harden and Kyrie, or Harden on one leg and without Kyrie, I think they beat Milwaukee. Yeah, it's
the Wizards. I have them at 11. I think they're probably the last team that I have that could, make a push for the play-in and make it into the playoffs if they have some luck in the playing games. That's probably where I would make the cutoff at 11.
Yeah, and they also have Bradley Beal who can go for 50 on any night. So that makes it, that makes them a threat at least for a play-in game. I mean, they might take a game in the playoffs, but it's not going to be any more than that. I think they're improved as a roster.
Yeah.
Not like anything changing the destiny of their franchise. I guess the thing looming over their head is, Bradley Beal's happy for now. Will that continue to be the case?
Well, I'm wondering how many times we see him, pouting on the bench after a 50-point game, but they're down by 30 this year. I mean, it's hard to not blame him at this point because he keeps extending his contract with Washington, and he's really not had, much of a team around him when he keeps doing that. But he seems to want to stay there. I know they're going to look to extend him again, but I don't know. Other teams would love to have him. I know that.
Yeah, I mean, if he, I think he might be the linchpin in the next team we're going to talk about, the 76ers. He might be the piece that finally gets a trade going for them. A lot of teams are just waiting for him to demand the trade, and then they're going to throw the house at getting him, and with good reason. I mean, he's a 30-point-a-game scorer. I mean, we talked about him last week as a top 15 guy in the league. He's a threat to win the scoring title every year, and he's been kind of wasted away on these Washington teams. I would like to see him play for a contender. It's not going to be Washington this year, and it's not going to be Washington next year, probably within the next 10 years, given what Washington has been. But yeah, I think a threat to make a play-in game, maybe take a game off of a higher seed in the playoffs, catch them on a weird night. I think they're going to be more competitive. I think they're going to stick around in more games than they did last year, but it's not anything to get super excited about. All right. We're in the final division here, the Atlantic Division, and I guess we'll start with the Philadelphia 76ers. They had a really good regular season last year, and I think the less we talk about the postseason for them, for Sixers fans, probably the better. Yeah, they had a really good season, and it kind of all fell apart in the playoffs. Embiid was kind of banged up. He had a torn meniscus, but he was just playing through it in the playoffs. He was still dominating. Like, he still looked really good in the playoffs. And it basically came down to game 7 with Atlanta, and Ben Simmons kind of, passed up a wide open dunk because he didn't want to get fouled.
Yeah.
And threw it to Thibault, who's not really a good free throw shooter. He makes 1 of 2, and that just swung the whole momentum of the game. And I don't know, if they get past that series and Simmons doesn't do that, do you think – I don't think they beat Milwaukee, but they might.
I don't think they would have beat Milwaukee. That one play is so iconic because it really changed. It was late in the game. It really changed the dynamic of the game. And he was going up against Trae Young. You can't tell me that he can get an and one bucket on Trae Young and only have to shoot 1 free throw and totally change the pace of the game.
Yeah, that would have won.
I wouldn't say they beat him.
And one on Trae Young in that situation, that probably wins them the game. It doesn't just change the dynamic of their season last year. It kind of changes everything for them moving forward. I think their title year was the year they had Jimmy Butler, and it basically came down to the Kawhi Leonard, 45 bounces on the Rams at the Rams at the buzzer, and they lose, and Toronto ends up winning the finals. I think they get past Milwaukee that year with Jimmy Butler, Harris, Simmons, and Embiid, and I think they get past that banged up Warriors team. So that was probably their year to win it. I don't think this will be the season to win it for them, barring some crazy trade. Never put anything past Daryl Morey, their GM, but right now they're after that game. They Doc Rivers, who I want to talk about a little bit, and Embiid just kind of both threw Ben Simmons right under the bus. Obviously, Simmons was not real happy about that, and he's basically said to them now, he's not coming back. He didn't show up for training camp. He's not been in any of their preseason games. He's happy to just sit out and have them dock his paycheck until they trade him. The only problem is there's not really a trade out there for him right now, with what Philadelphia would want to get. All that being said, they're projected at 50.5 wins, 51 for the season. I don't think there's any way they're hitting 50 wins this year. They're going to win a lot of games with or without Simmons and with or without the assets they get back from him. I still have them as the 5th seed, but it's not a 50-win team.
I have them at 5 as well. It was a really easy under for me. So much of it is really what's going to happen with Simmons. And when I'm looking at their roster, they're still going to be a pretty decent team. I mean, Embiid is definitely ball dominant, but you're missing an all defensive player when you don't have Ben Simmons. So I really wonder if they had a full season without him, if they're going to be in the play-in or
no. I still think they're 5th. I still think they're a 5th, 6th seed. Embiid is an MVP candidate. He may get it this year. I don't have him winning. But I mean, if Simmons doesn't play and they're a 3 seed, I think he's probably the MVP. I mean, if you look at his numbers last year, he would have won MVP had he not gotten hurt. I mean, talking 30 and 11 basically with all defensive player of the year type defense. Like, we haven't really seen a player at center dominate like he did since Shaq was in the league. And he's far and away the most dominant, traditional center we have. Now, you can make an argument for Jokic is better. But as far as a traditional center goes, you're not going to get any better than Joel Embiid. They have a good roster, even without Simmons. If you just subtract Simmons off of this team, they don't really have a point guard. But I like Tyrese Maxey. I like Shake Milton, Seth Curry. I don't like Danny Green, but, they have him. And I like Thibault. They also have Tobias Harris, who's an efficient scorer, a good third option. As if they can make a trade for Simmons, I think CJ McCollum out in Portland is about as good as they can expect at this moment right now. If Beal demands a trade, then they have the best package they can put forward for Beal. And and I think Washington would be enticed by Simmons. But the problem with trading Simmons is Philadelphia is ready to win right now. Traditionally, when you demand a trade, as your star player demands a trade, you're looking to rebuild right then and there. So you just want draft picks and young players back. Philadelphia doesn't want that. They want to upgrade on that position, and so they asked about Damian Lillard and company, and teams just aren't going to be interested in trading their best players for Ben Simmons at this stage.
I think that game really hurt his trade value because they saw how hesitant he is to really go at the basket and score or even take shots. And as a point guard, you need that. I think, if they can find a solid point guard and kind of move him into just a passing forward, I think he would do better there. I don't really see that on their roster. They do have the pieces to make a trade. I just don't know if any team really wants to deal with Simmons at this point after the way they've seen him act. Usually when they demand trades, it's the players being mistreated, but it's kind of the other way around here.
I think he's mistreated them, but they also, I think it's weird to just throw him under the bus, even if it's true after the game.
As publicly as Doc Rivers did it, I think that was pretty unheard of.
Do you think Doc Rivers is a good coach?
I was actually having this conversation a couple days ago with someone. I think his best chance to really do something was like 2013 with the Clippers. Again, he's had some great teams and they haven't really done much under him. So I don't think he's really great.
I think
one title really hangs on me, but
I think he's average at best.
He's had good teams.
I think he's average at best as an NBA coach. He's not an X's and O's guy. And so he's known as like a locker room kumbaya like coach. Like he's good at managing player personalities. But where has he done that? Where has he done that well? The Celtics, from his championship Celtics group, they all hate Ray Allen's guts. The Clippers thing, from everything I've read and heard from former players of that Clippers team, none of them got along. And now in Philadelphia, it's been a complete train wreck. So if he's not a good X's and O's guy, we're seeing that he's not good at like managing personalities. Like what is he good for as a coach? He won one title with an extremely over-talented Boston team when the league was kind of diluted, and he's not done anything else. He's kind of disappointed at every stop. I don't think he's that good of a coach.
Yeah, I think if you take that title away, no one is really going to make a push for him as a great coach, because he's had some great teams since that team, and they haven't really done much. Like I said, the Clippers team, I think, was his best chance to really go somewhere, and they got out in the first round. So
yeah,
he's definitely had the talent. They aren't really doing much there. My thing with this roster is I'm wondering how Andre Drummond is going to like his role, because I know last year he was unhappy with playing on the bench in LA, and I don't see him playing much over Embiid this year. So I don't really know the logic behind that.
I can't imagine the case for starting Andre Drummond over Joel Embiid, but
yeah, I don't see that happening.
What is he doing? Because he could have, like, if he had gone to your Celtics, for instance, he would have made a big difference for them. But like, why is he?
It addresses a lot for the Celtics.
Why is he content in this backup role? He knew he wasn't going to be playing over Anthony Davis, like in LA. And like, what did he think was going to happen there? And like, what does he think is going to happen here? I think he's an improvement on Dwight Howard, but for what they're going to ask him to do, maybe not. I don't know that they're getting a lot. He's a much better player than Dwight Howard, but the role he's going to have here, I think you could make an argument you would rather have Dwight Howard. I wouldn't, but I think you could make a case for it.
Does he even play 20 minutes? I mean, no. You certainly don't have him on the court at the same time as Embiid.
I think he plays a lot more during the regular season to save Embiid.
Yeah.
But during the playoffs, you're barely going to see him. You're going to see him 12 minutes.
You're going to have Embiid out there, and yeah. You certainly won't want them on the court at the same time. I think that would be a disaster.
It would just be Ben Simmons all over again, the issues they have with the fifth year. And I still believe in Simmons as a competent player. Like a lot of people start joking that he's bound for China. No, I still think he's an all NBA caliber player, at least all defensive. And like, I think he should have got defensive player of the year last year in the right situation with the right team built around him. I think he could make some noise, not win a championship as the main piece, but I don't know. I think he's okay. I do understand Joel Embiid's complaints though. When Simmons says that he wants to go to a team with a roster built around him, and Embiid says, "What are you talking about? All these teams have been built around you." They're both kind of right. Like the fit with Embiid has always been weird from Simmons's perspective, but they have catered more to Simmons's needs more than Embiid's needs over the course.
Yeah,
of
I agree.
Philly
They
thing.
surrounded him with enough shooters to really make a difference. It's just, I think they overpaid him too early, especially for a guy who, can't really shoot that well. 200 million is a lot. I think you had to probably give it to him, but
Yeah,
I think that's a big reason why a lot of teams don't want him now anyway.
they also locked up Embiid, which is important. Um, I guess the bad news for them is they're already over the luxury tax limit for next year.
Yeah.
So there's not
Yeah.
really going to be a lot of improving that you can do on this roster outside of trading Simmons. If you were Daryl Morey, what would you be interested in? Like, is there a trade out there that's like speaking to you outside of like Damian Lillard? I think we would both agree that that's the best package, but
Yeah.
Portland isn't willing to play.
I would definitely take Damian Lillard on my team anytime. I wouldn't want Kyrie. I think you're trading another issue, trading for another issue at that point. I think maybe the best point guard you could get is Fox. I think he'd fit well with them. I just don't, I don't know how that trade would work.
If I were
I
Sacramento,
don't know what else you'd be getting.
if I were Sacramento, I wouldn't do that. But if I were Daryl
I wouldn't
Morey and
either.
you told me I could get Fox and Buddy Hield for some combination of Ben Simmons and Danny Green, I guess would probably have to be the package with the salaries. I would take that in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Do you feel good? Would you feel good if you got Colin Sexton?
I don't know. I think it'd be interesting to see him in that fit. I wouldn't be super excited about it probably. I don't know.
And I think the trick for them, I think they're going to have to get a third team involved. I think they're going to
Yeah.
have to find a team with a disgruntled star player, be it if Damian Lillard decides that Portland isn't working out or Beal decides Washington isn't working out. There may be another guy that we don't know about yet that, it could happen. But if they get like a third team involved, they take that team's star player, trade Simmons to one of the teams, and then, the team with that just wants to get like a decent player in Simmons, they could trade their picks to the team that's trading their star player to Philly to give them a chance to rebuild. I don't think you're going to get a 1-for-1 swap with this deal to get Simmons moved. And they may have to wait till the deadline. And the unfortunate part for Philly is the longer he sits out, the worse his trade value is. I think they're going to end up having to settle for CJ McCollum. And people are going to freak out in Philadelphia because a year ago they were talking about trading Simmons for James Harden. I don't think that was ever happening. I don't think Houston's owner was ever going to trade Harden to Daryl Morey after everything that happened with them. So I don't know.
I don't think that would have happened either.
I don't know that that's fair. I think Philly was just used as leverage to get more picks out of Brooklyn. But yeah, they've kind of got like a big dark cloud looming over their head. That being said, I still think they're a playoff team, and I still think they win a lot of games this year, kind of regardless of what happens.
Yeah, they'll definitely be in the playoffs. I mean, it really speaks to Embiid with the way he, can step up and really be that guy. And if they are a top 3 seed, he certainly is the MVP pick for the year.
I think they're an
easy.
I think they're an easy under though. At 50 wins, 51 wins. If Embiid gets hurt, like that's not that unlikely. And then they're a bottom feeder team overnight. And then also just this roster with the distraction of Simmons hitting 50 wins is kind of a tall order for them.
Yeah, that was the easy under for me. I think that was, right away.
As far as bets go, I think Orlando and Philly as unders are pretty solid picks. Cleveland is also a decent one. And then I think Detroit for the over is probably the strongest over we've had so far.
Yeah, I would agree.
All right. Moving on to the Brooklyn Nets. Do you want to take us away with the Brooklyn Nets?
Yeah, so here's another team with uncertainty with their point guard. No one really knows what's going to happen. I think Kyrie is able to practice in Brooklyn now. I think they've lifted that, but he's not allowed to play in games in Brooklyn.
Correct.
So
yeah, that's the way.
Whatever that means. I think Harden should be their point guard. I think Kyrie's a better fit at the 2. Harden, it's not really a knock on Kyrie. Harden's just a better playmaker. KD is my pick for MVP this year. And I'm
Oh,
thinking that just because I don't think the Mavs will have the record to really support Luka being the MVP unless he's giving you like 35 a night.
huh.
And it's if you don't have Kyrie and Harden's, limping along, they're going to be a competitive team. And I think that speaks a lot to KD.
Yeah, they're 56 and a half wins for, 57 and 25 is basically the record that you're looking at. They were on pace for 55 and 27 last year. I guess you would bet the over on this team.
Yeah, I took over.
I certainly wouldn't bet the under, but I don't feel super strongly about any of the overs this year, especially with this team. They're kind of older. They've got some injury prone guys. It could be, Harden hasn't really been injury prone, but I have to feel like the step back for him is coming. I have to, just because he had so many miles in Houston carrying those teams.
Yeah.
He's not a guy that takes super great care of his body, as we saw from the supersized version of Harden we got last year. So I feel like something's got to give with him. I'm surprised by the KD MVP pick. He was 27 a game last year. Do you think he hits that again this year?
Yeah, he's definitely at that level. I think just seeing him erupt in the playoffs really showed that he's still here regardless of his leg injuries.
Yeah.
And I think if you're missing Kyrie the whole year and they're still a competitive team, I think that's, a lot to do with KD.
Well, they're not going to be missing him for the whole year, just for
half the year,
just for home games and some away games, based on the
home games and when they play the Warriors.
Yeah,
and Toronto.
I have them finishing second in the conference, but I have them winning the title.
Yep.
I don't feel great about that title pick, but like in a vacuum, if we were doing like a no injury simulation of the league, this is far and away the best team. I mean, they've got a very strong bench. They've got three of the best scorers in NBA history. And kind of what you mentioned about Harden, he's a really solid point guard. And Kyrie at the peak of his powers, in the Cleveland years when they were competing for titles, he was playing off the ball with LeBron as the primary playmaker. He's kind of ill-suited to play point guard with his passing ability. He's not bad at it, but that's not like he's better at just scoring. Just give him the ball and he scores. And they're set up to do that very well. They've got really good center depth, which I guess would be the only weakness on this team. But they've got everything. It's just a matter of can this group of injury-prone old players stay healthy?
Yeah, that's definitely a concern. So I have stock in Nick Claxton since the day he got drafted. I think this is going to be a big year for him.
He surprised me.
Yeah, I think he's going to be good. And I really do like Bruce Brown on their bench, but I think if you take Kyrie out of the equation, Patty Mills is your starting point guard or in the starting rotation, or maybe you put Bruce Brown there. I really don't know how that looks. I have them at the 1 seed, just best case scenario. I think you had them at 2 and we flipped Milwaukee.
I had them at 2 just because they're gonna have the Kyrie situation. Also, they're gonna sit Durant and Harden and Kyrie. Even if it were a normal year, they would still sit those guys out a lot. Blake Griffin, I have to imagine, is gonna miss a handful of games. LaMarcus Aldridge, same thing. They got him back, which I thought was crazy. They also brought in Paul Millsap and James Johnson. Probably not a lot of people know about James Johnson. I have to be honest, I wouldn't have if he didn't play for the Heat. He does a little bit of everything. Like he's got some playmaking to him. Like he's a guy that gets some assists. He rebounds. He plays tough defense. He doesn't really shoot, but he's a dude you want on a team, on a playoff team. Like he's up there and if we were to make a team of the toughest guys, he's on it. Like he's just a dude that you don't mess with. And then I don't know. They've got some guard stuff. I mean, they bring in Patty Mills on an affordable deal. I think that's a really good pickup. Bembry, also really good pickup, 3-and-D guy. He always torches the Heat for whatever reason. Then they draft Cam Thomas. Do you feel any sort of way about Cam Thomas out of LSU?
Not super strongly. He doesn't have a great opportunity to make an impact right away in Brooklyn. I think he's just one of those guys that's going to have to, sit behind the vets for a little bit. I think they might miss Jeff Green more than people think because he kind of proved to be a pretty reliable 3-and-D guy for them in the playoffs and throughout the season.
I think James Johnson can pick up the defensive side of that at least. And I think he
Yeah.
gives you a little bit more playmaking wise offensively. I don't think Demboya plays for them hardly at all. I mean, they got him for
Yeah.
nothing, basically. He really hasn't done anything. He's still, I would say, probably pretty young. I don't know his exact age, but I think he's probably no older than 25. So, like, maybe he turns into something for them. Day'Ron Sharpe is another guy they drafted out of North Carolina who I think could see some action for them if LaMarcus and Blake are inevitably hurt. He's just he plays super hard. He's got really high motor, and he just rebounds the heck out of the ball. He's a pretty decent shot blocker, not as good as you would probably hope, but the rebounding side of it, like he's kind of a little bit like Reggie Evans was, where he's just a dude who just gobbles up every rebound. So that actually could end up being like, you know, if you got him for 10 minutes and he just comes in and kind of changes the rebounding side of the game, that could really help them. They're the most talented team far and away. But we saw what happened to them in the playoffs last year, and it could happen again this year. I do think the window for this team is incredibly short. I think this is probably their last best year at a title shot.
Yeah, if last year wasn't the last year, it's definitely this one. And we're talking about an inch of Katie's foot on the line. They may
his
win the
big
title
toe,
last year.
his big toe basically on
Yeah.
the line, and they're moving on, and they
might win the title that year. I don't know.
They might because they would have gotten Kyrie and Harden back fully healthy at some point.
And it wasn't a very deep team last year either. I think this year they kind of built it out a little bit.
Yeah, they brought in some vets. I think Paul Millsap, I think that's a big pickup. And that's kind of an understated pickup for them. But, you know, he's not the all-star level player he was, you know, or nearly to that level. But he's still a guy who's been in the playoffs a lot. He's played in some big series. He's played for some good teams. I mean, when you can bring some combination of Paul Millsap, LaMarcus Aldridge, and Blake Griffin off your bench, like that's pretty good.
Yeah, I think their bench is a lot better than they were last year.
Yeah, they'll be tough to beat. I mean, healthy, I don't think anybody beats them, but we saw even last year in the Milwaukee series, even when you only got one of those guys, it's still a tough team. Steve Nash is a good coach. I think he's probably in the running for coach of the year this year. But we'll see. All righty, the New York Knicks. I guess I'm talking about the Knicks here. They surprised a lot of people last year, including myself. I mean, I looked at their team and I'm like, well, here's another like lottery bound year for the Knicks. Like they're going to miss out on the top pick and win just a few too many games. But they were the 4th seed, and they were really good. Julius Randle was incredible for them last year. We talked about him a little bit last week. He was in the top 5 for MVP voting, I believe, and he was all NBA second team. And they've kind of didn't really do a lot in the playoffs. They took the Hawks to 6, which I think was okay. But watching that series, you could really see the difference in the talent level of the two teams. Like Derrick Rose was basically that Knicks team's second best player. Tom Thibodeau is the coach there, which I don't love. Last year, they were on pace for 47 wins. This year, they're on pace for 42, or they're projected 42. 41 and a half is the over-under for them. I've got it under. I've got them finishing as the 8th seed. I think they kind of take a step back this year. I don't have them winning their play-in games, so they will not be in the playoffs proper. Okay. They bring in Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier, and they just kind of re-sign the rest of the group. I don't think those two guys move the needle enough for this to really put them ahead of some of the teams they were ahead of last season.
So I have them at the 7th seed. I would definitely go under 41 and a half as well. And they really were a classic Tom Thibodeau team last year. You know, they work hard in the regular season. They're gassed by the playoffs.
Yeah, that was pretty much what it was.
Yeah, and Derrick Rose, I think he'll stay at the current level that he is. I think he was huge for them. It really comes down to RJ Barrett and Kemba Walker. I don't know if Randall will be in the MVP conversation again, but I would expect him to have a similar role
I don't think so, but he'll be their best player and he'll play big minutes
Yeah,
because it's Tom Thibodeau. And he
yeah,
plays
he definitely will.
he definitely plays all the guys that he likes. It's just an insane amount of minutes. They really didn't lose a lot from last year. I guess you could. Reggie Bullock was kind of a loss.
That was the
For
only notable loss I saw was Bullock and his shooting.
not Ntilikina.
Wasn't a fan of him the day he got drafted. I'm still not.
I like Ntilikina. I still believe. Elfrid Payton, I guess, is kind of a loss. He was okay. I don't know. They really didn't lose a lot. I think Kemba Walker, even whatever he is at this point, I still think that's better than what you're probably getting from Elfrid Payton.
With him and D Rose, I think that's two really solid point guards to have, even though, Kemba's not the level he was 3 years ago.
Right. They
I
also
don't think you're complaining about that.
My only thing with the Kemba Walker thing is Emmanuel quickly is kind of left out in the cold. Like he was good for them last year as a rookie, and I think he's gonna, especially with Tom Thibodeau, I think he's gonna struggle to find minutes on this team. And he's a guy that you would probably want to develop if you're a Knicks fan or in the Knicks front office. I think because Derrick Rose and Kemba Walker aren't your long-term solutions at point guard, and you're not competing for a title anytime soon. I think they were a little reckless in the offseason with some of their spending, especially with the re-signing of guys. I don't know how you feel about it. They got Randall 4 years, 117. I think that's pretty good for him.
Yeah, I'm not upset about that one.
The 3 years, 27 million for Nerlens Noel, I thought was absolutely insane.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that one either.
He's a backup center, basically, and he's a good backup center. He was really good for them last year, but committing 3 years and 27 million to him is just going to be a lot. I mean, it's basically going to be an immovable contract. I don't think anybody's going to want to pick that up, except for maybe in the last year. They get Rose for 3 years, 43 million, which I thought was kind of a lot for him at this stage.
It seems high, but he kind of proved himself, I think, when he got traded to New York. I have no problem giving him that contract, but he's not young anymore, so I don't know if by that third year you're really going to like.
I think I'm more concerned about the years than I am the number. And then 2 years they get Alec Burks back, 2 years, 20. I don't feel strongly one way or another about that. I mean, he was good for them in the playoffs, but he's not a needle mover. Fournier got 4 years, 78 million. I thought that was a lot for Evan Fournier.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad the Celtics weren't picking that up, but hate to see another team do it.
Statistically,
a little overpaid.
Statistically, he's one of the worst playoff performers we've ever seen in the league. Like, I don't know if it's a fluke, and like he hasn't really had that much of an opportunity because of Orlando. Being in Orlando, but I guess we've been kind of down on them. They do have some trade chips. Quickly, it looks like they're kind of moving away from him. Kevin Knox, if anybody still believes in him. Obi Toppin is kind of in a weird place on this roster. I think he could be good for somebody, but he's just not going to get opportunities here. And then Mitchell Robinson, it doesn't look like they're to keen on him if they're signing Noel for 3 years, 27. They've also Taj Gibson is still around somehow.
I'm surprised too.
2 years, 10 for Taj Gibson.
I'm worried about the years there. I don't know if I'd want him for 2 years. The thing about the Knicks is they do have some cap space going into next off season.
They do.
If they have a good season, they're obviously one of the biggest markets. They could make a push for a good free agent.
I think Mitchell Robinson's contract is up this year. So if they're planning on re-signing him, that's where a lot of that cap space would probably go. RJ Barrett, I think, is up after the following season. I don't know. I guess the case for this team not taking a step back, I can't see them finishing in the top 6 in the East this year. But I guess if I were to make a case that they will, it's that RJ Barrett just takes a huge leap forward. Like it looks like he can.
That's really what it is. What would you give him in his extension?
I don't know. I think I'd feel good about like 25 a year for him. At this point,
I think 20 to 25 is all right.
Yeah, New York thinks that they're a free agent destination, but we've seen that that's not really the case. So I think they need to, I think they did the right things. I just think they paid some of the role guys a little too much. I think you could have found Nerlens Noel level production for a lot cheaper on the free agent market. There were some
Yeah, you definitely can.
there were some centers floating around. I think Boogie Cousins is still floating around as a free agent. I don't think anybody's picked him up.
Yep.
Not that they're similar at all, but like that's just my point is you can find value at center like pretty easily. Yeah, they also traded down a bunch in the draft, which is fine. It looks like they're just building up a stockpile of picks to maybe make a big trade, which I think is probably this team's way forward. I don't know. I don't feel really great about this team. Obviously, I have them not really making the proper version of the playoffs, but I don't know.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I have them in the play-in game at 7. The way I did 7 through 10 was if I put them at 7 and 8, I'm assuming they won their play-in game. So
yeah,
I have the I have the Knicks and Bulls winning their play-in games and making the playoffs like that. But I mean, neither of those teams I see doing much in the first round.
yeah. I have them finishing 8th in terms of record, but I have them losing it in the play-in. I don't. I think that the same issues that they had against the Hawks with the lack of scoring and like come playoff time and kind of lack of options to go to. Also, their guys are just gassed. I mean, Derrick Rose looked like he needed like an oxygen mask, like in that Hawks series. It's going to be tough for them, but I don't know. We'll see. I mean, they have them take like Vegas, or I guess DraftKings specifically agrees with us that they take a step back. I think it's a little bit further of a step back than even they have them. All righty, it is time for your Boston Celtics. I think this is going to be a disagreement point for us.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot to talk about. And it pains me to say this, but the Taco Fall era is now over in Boston.
Oh, I know.
He's I don't think we talked stuck with that logjam in Cleveland.
Yeah, he'll never see the court in Cleveland. They've got too many centers.
Yeah. Obviously last year was a huge disappointment. They were another one of those teams that, only had a month and a half in the offseason to prepare. And, I kind of feel it because I played basketball yesterday and I feel like I need 2 off seasons to really get out there and play. So a month and a half is, I don't know how they do it, but they made a ton of moves since the season ended to really address their issues. I think their biggest issues were, a really solid rim protecting center and bench scoring. Ainge got out and Brad takes over. And his first moves were really obviously hiring the coach, Udoka, who has a really good relationship with Tatum, Brown, and Smart from the USA Basketball. So I think that's going to be good for them.
I like him as a coach.
I think he's awesome.
I've heard nothing but good things about him.
Yeah. And I think what Brad did was really get the team back together that made it to the conference finals in 2019 and 2018. Enes Kanter and Al Horford. I think Enes Kanter is a great pickup. He's an offensive rebounding machine, and that's definitely something that they need. Got rid of Kemba, obviously, which hurts considering what I thought that they would be getting out of Kemba. But, Dennis Schroeder, I think, can address at least some of that scoring. I think he's going to be coming off the bench, which Smart would start over him.
Oh, really? You think Smart is going to start at point guard?
I think he might. I think it's a better opportunity for Schroeder to really lead the bench unit in scoring. I don't think I think if you put him in the starting lineup, you kind of see what happened in LA where he's just taking a bunch of shots, getting the ball out of Tatum Brown's hands. So I think he's better fit on the second unit, but Tatum showed that he can be a 5 to 8 assist guy last year too when Smart was injured.
Yeah.
So I think his playmaking's developed. Smart's a decent playmaker. I'm expecting some solid play from Pritchard. I really liked his rookie season. I'm high on them. If you haven't noticed, I haven't mentioned my 3 seed yet. So that's where I'm putting Boston.
That's
that's where the disagreement comes in, I'm sure.
Yeah. I actually, when I did my list originally, I completely forgot about them. Yeah. I somehow,
oh goodness.
But when I redid it, I have them as the 6th. So they're 46.5 on DraftKings. I think that's an easy under. They were a 500 team last year. Are you over or under on them?
I'm definitely over. And I think it's because, we're not dealing with the month and a half off season that they dealt with. If they can stay healthy, I think if Tatum is a 30 points a night guy, I think he's top 5 MVP considerations if they finish in the top 3 in the conference. I think they're just they have a better start than they did last year in terms of rest, and their players are healthy. They have a new coach. They have a GM who's not making bad decisions. He let Hayward walk for free, and I'm still not over that one.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough because
Yeah,
kind of like we talked about with Rozier, like it's really important to hold on to those assets because
yeah,
in the NBA you can go over the salary cap to sign guys, to re-sign guys. So, but you
right,
can't sign new players when you go over the salary cap. So teams typically
right.
are over the cap. And so when you re-sign a guy, you keep that at least as a trade chip.
Yeah,
Yeah, and they
and
didn't. They haven't done that.
I know Richardson and Smart are, starting to get a little bit older, but I think they really have some elite perimeter defending in Tatum, Brown, Smart, and Richardson.
If Smart can get back to the form he was at 2 and 3 years ago, then yes. If we see the version of Marcus Smart we got last year, I felt like guys were just kind of torching him, like guards specifically. He could still defend the big guys, but guards, I don't know. If he continues to kind of peter out defensive with his perimeter defense specifically, I think it'll be tough. I think starting him is tough. And I think having him and Schroeder as your point guard rotation is going to be rough. I thought that was their biggest position of need, was finding a point guard. And they've got 2 point guards now, if you consider Marcus Smart one of them, that just have a habit of taking 5 to 6 just terrible shots a game. I think that's going to come back to bite him.
He makes bad shooting decisions, and that's another thing with Schroeder is he's not as good as defense as Smart, which is why I would put him in the starting lineup. And I think Schroeder, since he's younger and takes more shots, that's why I would put him on the second unit. So, you're not taking the ball out of Tatum and Brown's hands as much. I think Pritchard will see a bump in minutes. I think he was really good last year and definitely probably their best true point guard.
I figured if you weren't starting Schroeder, you would start Peyton Pritchard.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
I wouldn't be surprised to see him starting a couple games.
I see a couple of problems with your team. You guys have the foundation of the 2 awesome wings that any team would dream of having, but they don't have a point guard to really orchestrate it. So what it devolves into, and I don't know if you noticed this, last year, I didn't watch as much of them last year, so I can't say if this was the case, but at least in their playoff run in the bubble, there was a lot of your turn, my turn with Brown and Tatum, and that just doesn't create for good offensive efficiency and like good pace, good nothing. And they're kind of they were kind of middle of the league in pace and points last year and near the bottom in assists. I don't think they addressed the playmaking problems. The other huge hole that they had was center. So they bring in Al Horford. I hope at this stage in his career, for your sake, he's still got something left in the tank. I suspect he doesn't. Then it's Robert Williams and Enes Kanter. Now, I also like Enes Kanter. He's a complete liability on defense, but he is a monster scoring and rebounding. I just don't think he's going to see a lot of run. So then it comes down to like 6'8" Robert Williams as your center, and it's it's just tough. Also, I'm not super thrilled about the wing situation outside of Tatum and Brown. I guess Richardson you could throw in there, but it's okay. If they had one more like really good wing player and they could go to that guy, like kind of what they had with Hayward, Brown, and Tatum, that was really tough to deal with. And they don't have that anymore. I don't feel like. Maybe Josh Richardson remembers how to shoot threes, maybe not. But if he remembers how to shoot threes, then you guys are dangerous again. But the point guard spot and the center spot, I just think they're just such holes for you guys.
Yeah, I think Nesmith is going to have to be a 40% guy from 3 if we really want good wings. And the thing with Hayward, that team had 4 20-point plus a night guys on the starting lineup that I don't know how you even go about that. And losing him really made a difference. And you saw that last year. Their centers, for some reason, Danny Ainge really likes centers that are not taller than 6'8". I think at a time it was Robert Williams and Tice, both 6'8" guys.
Grant Williams also played some center who's like 6'6".
Grant Williams. Yeah. Horford's at least 7 foot. And, in the preseason has kind of showed that he can space the floor and shoot the ball. They traded for Moses Brown in the middle of the year at the deadline, who's 7'2", and then ended up trading him away.
They traded him for John. Yeah, they got
Yeah.
Josh
And I
Richardson from
was
that.
upset about that because I was like, finally, we have a center who's 7'2". He's young. Like he could be a really elite defender, but he's gone. I think Williams' defense, nothing to complain about. It's just he's a little short.
How do you feel about 4 years, 48 million for him?
I think it's, I mean, in terms of the 4 years, I like it. I think 12 million a year for a center who's probably going to be your starting center. I don't know how they are going to do with Horford. I'm okay with that.
If he's your starting
Smart,
center, I feel good about it. But as a backup center,
yeah.
I'm pretty upset if I'm paying $12 million a year to a backup center.
Well, the thing with Horford is the reason that they didn't re-sign Horford is because they didn't want to give him the max, and then they trade for Horford and just get the max contract right
Yeah,
back. So I don't.
yeah, they could have just re-signed him. Instead, they give up Kemba Walker and a lottery pick this year that could have really helped them fill out this roster. They did end up getting Juancho Hernan Gomez, which I don't know.
Yeah.
He might give you something, especially as like a stretch four. I don't know. I worry for you guys. It's the same issues you had last year. This is like eerily similar to the team last year. And I think a lot of it was the bubble, like you said, and like we kind of mentioned with the Heat, like the teams that made it far into the bubble didn't have the time to prepare for last year's season. So they really struggled. But I think when you get, if you have to play Philadelphia at some point in the playoffs, like, what are you going to do with Embiid, with Horford, Robert Williams, and Enes Kanter? And I guess you could say, well, what do you ever do with Embiid? But I just, I don't know. I just think the center and point guard positions, which have traditionally, until recently, in the NBA, have been probably the two most important spots to get right. And I think Kyle Lowry, if you guys had the room or been able to get him, I think that would have been a huge pickup. A point guard like that, a guy who's like more of a playmaker first, rather than a scoring option. Because Tatum and Brown for a starting lineup are enough for scoring options. You guys, you need shooters and rim protecting center and playmaker, guy to kind of orchestrate the offense. I'm afraid that you don't have the offense orchestrator.
Yeah, the biggest thing last year was really just no orchestrator and not really depth in terms of scoring. So I think Schroeder kind of addresses that. It's just I don't know where they're going to put him in the lineup or how they're going to use him. I see him as a second unit guy, and maybe Pritchard sees some starts and Smart. I'm not thrilled about the centers.
I think Schroeder will want to start. And I think
I'm sure he'll want to.
I think he'll be a problem if you don't start him, because I don't think especially if you decide you're going with Peyton Pritchard as the starter, I think that'll just piss him off. And we've seen him kind of be a headache already. So I don't know.
Overall, I think just in the new start with their new coach, they've kind of addressed their problems. Their problems are still there, but Tatum and Brown are going to take a huge leap this year too. And I see him competing. I don't think they'll do a lot of damage long term or late in the playoffs, but they'll definitely be top 5 seed at the worst.
It looks like they are over the tax threshold already for next season. That's another problem.
This is kind of your Smart's team. Contract. Smart's contract. I think he's underpaid in terms of what guards are getting, but the long-term commitment to him, I'm not sure. I'm glad to have him on the team. I'm glad he didn't get traded last year. But yeah, we're kind of locked up for the next couple of years.
Yeah, and Danny Ainge was considered to be like a really good general manager, but I don't think he did a very good job drafting. With that Brooklyn trade where you guys shipped off Garnett and Pierce and got all those picks back from the Nets, you had Tatum and Brown to show for it, and that's basically it.
Right. I don't think he's that great at drafting either. It's not hard to draft well when you have the 3rd pick and Jason Tatum falls into your lap. Jaylen Brown, I wasn't super sure about when he got drafted, but he's turned out.
He did trade for that 3rd pick because they had the number 1 pick and he traded down,
right,
which ended up being a great decision.
Yeah, and I think he was going to take Tatum regardless. I think that's the smart decision, is to trade down because everyone knew Fultz was going 1 if Philly had him. So the move is smart, but I think, when you have those picks, it's easy to call yourself really talented at drafting when the rest of your draft picks really don't speak for that.
Well, Romeo Langford is a guy that's basically shown nothing, and he was a pretty decently high lottery pick. I think they took him the pick after Hero, didn't they?
Yeah, he was 14th.
Yeah, that's tough. And that pick in particular is really tough for Boston fans because that came down to a coin flip and we won it. And so
Yeah,
you guys really liked Hero too, but we ended up getting
yeah,
him. So yeah,
yeah.
that changes the dynamic of this roster if you guys have Tyler Hero. But yeah, we'll see. I don't think that they're better than Atlanta or Miami specifically. They could be better than Philly. Um, and,
I
and
went back and forth with Miami and Boston, where I had them ranking 3 and 4. But I gotta be higher on Boston.
especially with Philly, though, this could be a complete train wreck for them this season. I had them at fifth, but like if they end up getting nothing for Simmons at all, then I think you guys will definitely finish above them.
Yeah.
All right, last team, last and I guess not least, but pretty close to least. The Toronto Raptors. They had a really tough year last year. They were a playoff team in the bubble. They gave Boston everything that they wanted, and they were a tough playoff team. I didn't want to play them, but last year they were forced to play in Tampa because of Toronto's COVID restrictions with travel and like quarantining. It just wasn't going to be feasible. And they had kind of a disastrous year. Siakam, who was, early on in the year was an MVP candidate in the year of the bubble. And he just, ever since COVID has hit, he's just not been the same player. So he took a huge step back. They just really didn't have a good year. Now they're kind of gearing towards rebuilding, it looks like. I mean, they do the sign and trade with the Heat, with Kyle Lowry. They get back Goran Dragic, who I don't imagine will stick around for very long with them. And they get back Precious Achua, who I really like as like a young player. I think they may have gotten a pick too out of the deal. I wasn't super pumped about giving away Achua, but for Kyle Lowry, it works for me. Yeah, I have them finishing 13th. I could see them being like a real surprise team and playing really well with Scotty Barnes. Like they've got some exciting players, and if Siakam gets back to form, I could see them doing well. But I think they're more likely a seller at like the deadline and throughout the season. DraftKings has them at 35.5 wins, so 36-46 for their final record. Last year they were on pace for 31 wins if you played 82 games. I think it's probably an under. I don't feel super strongly about it. It's probably an under though.
Yeah, I think I'm going under too. I can't really say that they're better than last year, even though they're back in Toronto. I think they're losing a lot in Lowry's leadership. I have them at 12, so we're pretty much the same there almost.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I had Detroit ahead of them. I think maybe we had Detroit and them swapped. Yeah, I mean, they've still got some players. And as far as rebuilding goes, if you're going to hit the reset button on this, Scotty Barnes looks really exciting, at least in preseason stuff. And Precious Achua, I don't know how many people have had a chance to watch him play. He looks like he's going to be a pretty special player defensively. And if you
I
go
like Precious.
Anunoby, Barnes, and Achua as your front court, I think that's pretty good. I think that's going to be really good defensively, really versatile. Anunoby is a lot of people's guys' most improved player for this year. He's not mine, but I think he'll finish top 5 in that for sure. And then for trade chips, I think you could see Van Vliet on the move, Boucher, Kem Birch, and obviously Dragic. I don't know if anybody will want to trade for Dragic, but he might be a buyout guy, but we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have a ton to say about them. They really are not much better than last year, so I kind of expect them to be lower pack.
It's really the same team. And so I guess if you're betting on this, do you expect that being actually home is a 5-win improvement? Because that's what the numbers will tell you.
Yeah, I'm going no.
I don't know. The East is a lot tougher than it has been. And I think Siakam's likely on the move too. They don't seem real high on him anymore. Yeah, I mean, they got some young guys, I guess, who are exciting. I mean, Anunoby seems like he's pretty good. Scotty Barnes and Achua. I think that's a decent place to start. So they kind of shocked everyone by taking Scotty Barnes before Jalen Suggs, which
Yeah,
I was surprised, but
I don't know. We'll see how that works out. Barnes looks like he could be like the next kind of Draymond Green, like an elite defensive player. He guarded 1 through 5 in college, and by guarded 1 through 5, I mean they assigned him to guard 1 through 5. Whoever's the best player on the other team, he guarded them. Pick point guards up full court. He's a high energy guy. And he passes the ball extremely well for a guy who's a small forward, power forward, basically. And as young as he is, his understanding of the game is really high, but he's not a good shooter. He might turn into a decent shooter at one point, but if he doesn't improve the shooting, he's going to be kind of limited.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to really regret taking Scotty, but I would have taken Suggs at 4. I don't know if they had known that they were going to have a sign and trade for Lowry at that point. I don't remember the timing of all that, but
no, they wouldn't have.
I think if they knew they were getting,
yeah, they may have, because then you're rolling out there with Suggs, Van Vliet, Anunoby, Siakam, and some combination of Khem Birch and Boucher for your center. That's a decent squad. That you might make the playoffs with that group. Right now, with the point guard situation, you basically got Dragic and Van Vliet, and that's it. And they're probably both starting. So I don't know. I think also they re-signed Gary Trent Jr. for 3 years, $51 million. That seems really high for him, but they're not competing for anything within the next 3 years, so it almost doesn't matter.
yeah, I like Gary Trent a lot, and that salary was a little surprising to me. I think I liked him a lot in Portland. So the move when I think it was Norman Powell was the trade for him. I think it kind of sucked for Trent because he was in a pretty good spot in Portland. But I mean, I like him as a player. I just don't know if 3 years 51 is validated just yet.
Yeah, he's a good 3-and-D guy. I mean, that's probably what it is for him. I think we could see a very different looking Toronto team next season or by halfway through the year. I don't expect Dragic will be there for the year. And then I think there's a case for Van Vliet and Siakam being moved as well. Masai Ujiri is not known for showing loyalty to guys. So I definitely think that he'll do whatever's best for the team. But yeah, that's it. I guess we go into the recap here with our projected standings. And then we kind of made a playoff bracket. So just to recap for me, I had Milwaukee, Brooklyn, Atlanta, Miami as the 4th seed, Philly, Boston, Chicago, the Knicks, the Pacers, the Wizards. That rounds out the top 10 and the play-in. And then just missing the play-in, I had Charlotte and Detroit, Toronto, Cleveland, and Orlando as the last teams in the conference. I think Orlando is probably the worst team in the league.
Yeah, and our lists are very similar. We flipped a couple spots. I had Brooklyn, Milwaukee, Boston, Miami at 4, Philly at 5, Atlanta at 6, followed by the Knicks and Bulls, and then 2 play-in teams overall.
I'm sorry, it kind of cut out a little bit. What was the last bit you said?
How much did you miss?
You said something about the play-in.
The ones I had just missing the play-in were Washington and Toronto, followed by Detroit, Cleveland, and Orlando. So we were pretty similar in that aspect.
So bracket-wise, I actually did the play-in games. So I had Chicago as the 7, beating the New York Knicks as the 8 in the first play-in game. That would match up Chicago with Brooklyn. And then on the other side, I had Indiana losing to Washington, and then Washington beating New York for the 8th seed. So I have New York losing 2 in a row. I just think there are issues with scoring. It's going to be the same thing this year as it was last year for them. Come playoff time, when the game slows down, it's hard to get easy buckets. They don't have guys who can get you buckets. I mean, Randall kind of struggled in the playoffs a little bit, I would say. That would be fair. But he's not really like an isolate and go get you a basket player either. So it's kind of unfair to cast him as that. And that's kind of what he has to be for them. So barring RJ Barrett taking a huge leap forward and winning most improved player, I don't think that New York is going to make any noise this year. So first round, who did you have? So at the top, I had Milwaukee playing Washington. Milwaukee obviously winning, moving on to the second round.
Yeah, I had Brooklyn as the 1 seed and then Chicago as the 8 seed. Brooklyn beating them probably 4 or 5 games.
Yeah, I think 4 games for Milwaukee versus Washington. Milwaukee doesn't play with their food as much as Brooklyn does, or some of these other teams.
Right.
I have Miami and Philly as the 4 and 5. Miami moving on. I think it's so hard to gauge what Philly is going to do this year, but Bam kind of dominates Embiid as much as you can dominate Embiid. Like Embiid has a really tough time scoring on Bam, and I think that played out over a series, I think you would. But I don't think there's any chance Philly could beat us in a playoff series, barring them getting.
Especially if they
Lillard.
bring yeah, especially if they bring Embiid out from the post and kind of get him on the perimeter. That really kind of opens up the lane for everyone. I have the exact same thing. Miami beating Philly
as the 4 and 5.
Yeah.
Okay, and then 3 and 6, I have Atlanta beating Boston. Yeah, I just think Atlanta's better. I think that would be.
I have the opposite.
That would be a really competitive series, though. I think that would go 7. Kind of even on my side of things, like those two teams do not match up well against each other as far as like what the other team does. Like Atlanta doesn't really have a lot of defensively to contend with Tatum and Brown, and on the other side, depending on what version of Marcus Smart you get, it could be a big Trae Young series. And then rebounding wise, the Capella and Collins combo versus Robert Williams is just whatever's left of old man Al Horford is just not going to be good.
That's where I'm hoping Enes Kanter comes in.
Yeah, Enes Kanter actually could be a big deal in that series because Capella isn't exactly hurting you with like post moves.
Yeah, I have Boston winning that series. Probably would go 7 games.
Yeah, I think that goes 7 if they match up. Obviously, we're talking about hypothetical playoff matchups here, so who knows? Brooklyn and Chicago. I think that's probably a 5-game series. I think it's at least a 5-game series, but they've got, Chicago's a team built around scoring a lot of points. Brooklyn is just better at that, and they're also better defensively. Brooklyn's not very good defensively, but they don't have to be. Like they've got 3 of the best scorers in NBA history. Yeah.
I have the Bucks and Knicks as 2 and 7, and the Bucks probably would take over, and I think they sweep.
Yeah,
that series.
I don't think that would be a close series. So in the second round, just to recap, I have Milwaukee, Miami, Atlanta, and Brooklyn. You have Boston instead of Atlanta, and that's the only difference, right?
Yeah, and then I have the seeds for Brooklyn and Milwaukee are flipped. So I have Brooklyn versus Miami, and then Boston versus
you have
Boston versus Milwaukee.
Yeah, so this is where it's going to differ a little bit. So I actually have Miami beating Milwaukee, and that could be the homer in me. But just watching them throughout the years, we just had a bad year last year. And honestly, if we win that that close game 1 in the playoffs with Milwaukee last year, they ended up taking it. But if we had come down the stretch, we played terribly in that game. And if we had found a way to win that game, I think psychologically, I don't know that Milwaukee would have recovered from that. Like it would have just been like, oh my gosh, we just cannot beat these guys. And it's because of matchups. Like Giannis, as good as Giannis is, Bam does better than anybody in the league on him. And then Jimmy Butler and Middleton is a good matchup for us. And then we've got Kyle Lowry now as a point guard to kind of contend with Drew Holiday. And then our extra guy, it comes down to our extra guys at that point. Our hero, our Oladipo, our Duncan Robinson is better than anything that they have for their extra dudes. If everything in the middle is a wash, everything as far as the top players. And so I think we just beat them. I think we're a better team, or at least we match up better. And I could see PJ Tucker just going nuts.
I like the matchup, Miami for Milwaukee, but I have Miami playing Brooklyn, and I don't think that they would beat Brooklyn in a series.
It's a different story. Yeah. I think that's more competitive.
I think they'd take 2 games.
Yeah. I think it would be a 6 or 7 game series. I don't think there's any way that that's a 5-game series. I
think 2 games at least.
Yeah. We don't match up as well with them just because I think we would put Bam on KD probably. And unfortunately, like Claxton does just enough to like kind of be a problem for like it would have been Ariza last year. This year it'll be PJ Tucker. I think Tucker will have trouble kind of keeping up with Claxton if we do that. Or we saw that PJ Tucker gets absolutely torched by KD if we decide to go that route. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't feel great about Kyle Lowry on either Harden or Kyrie either. That's a much tougher matchup for us. If we can somehow avoid playing them, I think we can make it to the finals. But I think if we have to go through Brooklyn in some way, I don't think it happens for us. So at the bottom of the bracket there, I had Atlanta, the 3, and Brooklyn, the 2, going up against each other. I think Brooklyn would easily win that matchup.
Yeah, I have Milwaukee playing Boston, and I don't think that's going to be, a super close series. I think it'd be over in 6 games.
Yeah, I think Atlanta would struggle with Brooklyn. I think that would be a 5 or 6 at most.
Yeah.
The only case for Atlanta would be Capella just eats them alive on the glass, but I don't even think that would be enough. That'd be Trae Young going for 50 and Kyrie going for 50 in that series.
Yeah.
So my conference finals here would be Miami and Brooklyn. Like we kind of discussed the Miami-Brooklyn matchup already. I have Brooklyn beating Miami as much as I love Miami.
Yeah.
I don't see a way past that team if they're healthy.
Yeah. I have Brooklyn, Milwaukee, and considering that 3 of the games being played, they would not have Kyrie Irving in Milwaukee coming off of a title. I think I'm going to put the Bucks over the Nets unless they're fully healthy and have all 3, unless Brooklyn's fully healthy and has all 3 stars for the series.
So you have
they definitely would
Milwaukee
probably win, but
in the finals.
yeah, I think Milwaukee's going to go back to the finals. I think they really showed that they're a legit team that can build around Giannis, which they hadn't proved before. Again, it did come down to KD's foot being on the line. And, would I be saying that this year if that didn't happen? I don't know.
No, you wouldn't.
But I think they're going to stay hungry. Yeah.
We'd be talking about a different coach in Milwaukee, probably Rick Carlisle.
Absolutely.
And, Mike Budenholzer, he was not going to be well thought of if they had another disappointing playoff loss, and may have trouble finding another head coaching gig right away. But now all of a sudden he's a championship coach. And if Doc Rivers has told us anything, it's you can really ride that one championship to a great career.
Absolutely. I mean, it's been 13 years since then. He's still getting good teams. So yeah, Budenholzer will never pay for a beer in Milwaukee ever again. I think they could beat the Nets, especially if they're dealing with Kyrie's issues and, who's healthy by then, who knows?
I begrudgingly put Brooklyn in the finals just because if they're healthy, and even 2 out of 3 of the guys, they're a tough team to beat.
Yeah.
But, and like, if I knew that maybe you're just going to have one of the 3, then we're obviously having a different conversation. But like, I don't know. They were tough to know what to make of because they're so volatile with the roster age and Kyrie and just a lot of the potential issues they have with injuries and chemistry, but they have far and away the most talent. I guess the case for Brooklyn over Milwaukee would be it did come down to Kevin Durant playing with Harden on one leg, and it came down to a foot on the line.
Yeah, to be that close without Kyrie and with half of James Harden, I think, and with the worst team that they have this year, really speaks to KD, and that's why I'm picking him for MVP this year. Yeah, I just think by the time they get to the playoffs, there's going to be a lot of miles on those guys, especially the older ones, and I just don't know how they're going to be dealing with that in the playoffs, especially with a good team like Milwaukee. I mean,
Was that the only award winner you had in this conference? Was KD for MVP?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned LaMelo for candidate for most improved.
Was that your pick?
I don't know if I'm going with that as my pick. I like him, but I also have some considerations in the West as well.
Yeah, we'll revisit it next week. As it stands, I don't have any award winners in the East, and I'm like, I don't know that that's actually the case. So I don't know. We'll see. I guess you could probably say Coach of the Year for Steve Nash if they get the 1 seed. Rookie of the Year. Oh, Rookie of the Year. I have Cade Cunningham winning Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, I think that's pretty. Yeah, that's fair.
I think the Rockets. I think the other candidate people. There's no way Evan Mobley gets it. A, as a center, and B, Cleveland is going to suck. So it comes down to Green on the Rockets and Cade in all likelihood. There could be a surprise in there. Kuminga is not a terrible dark horse candidate because the Warriors might be really good and he might be really important for them, especially with Wiggins missing a lot of games. But yeah, Cade, I just think they're going to be somewhat competitive, and I think that's going to help him at least narratively. And also just he seems to really be embracing like being a Detroit Piston, and that's rare.
That's hard to come by.
Yeah, especially as a top player. I think he had the most clutch shots or like game-winning shots or he was most efficient clutch shooter or something to that effect in college. And so if he's making the rounds of the highlights for game winners, like and he's putting up the numbers, which he'll have to in Detroit for them to be anything, and he'll have the opportunities to. I think that's going to be a no-brainer.
Yeah, and I think Houston has a gem in Jalen Green. I think he's going to be a scoring machine. I think they're just going to be a worse team, And
they're in the West.
Cade wins it too.
They're in the West. They've got just a lot more uncertainty on that roster. They're a younger team too. They're very young. They've got a lot of young dudes on that Rockets team, which we'll talk about next week. I actually like what they did, all things considered. But yeah, I still think Cade he's in an easier conference to get wins. If the teams are better and the numbers are somewhat similar in terms of like which looks better, because they're different players. Cade's going to have more assists, less points. Green is just a scoring machine. He's going to have a lot of points, but not a lot else. I think they'll give the edge to the person who's been more successful, especially if Cade can get them to a play-in game. I think that's easy.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, and I guess that's the only award winner I have so far. If I change my mind, we can always revisit it next week when we do the West.
Yeah.
But other than that, that's all I got. You got anything?
That's it for me.
All righty. Well, thanks for watching, everyone. Be sure and like and subscribe if you guys enjoyed the video, and look forward to our next week where we preview the Western Conference.